Part 88. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 905. Unlike the Nieto in the lower city, the Nieto in the upper city uses very standard Chinese, so 33 can also understand what it says. 33 took 2 seconds to react, and whispered in surprise, "This guy, can she speak Chinese?" "No matter what language it speaks, there's nothing surprising," Kaylan said solemnly, "we just need to ignore it." "I know." 33 curled his lips and said disdainfully, "Not to mention Nieto on this level, even if it's the one on the next level, I don't believe what she says." What Kaylan saw was Nieto, an intelligent biological computer with the appearance of a beautiful girl with long black hair, while what 33 saw was a squirming mass of rotten flesh. From the very beginning, 33 had a crush on Nieto. He was extremely vigilant, and it was impossible for him to believe that Nieto would help him. In his opinion, the reason why Nieto in Xiakan district was willing to reveal that information to himself and Kaylan was probably because he wanted to use them to achieve some goals. The relationship between them and Nieto was just about mutual use, and it was not possible at all. It's the same front. There is no such thing as trust from the beginning. If necessary, they can betray Nieto on the second level at any time. At the same time, they also believe that once they lose their use value, Nieto will betray them mercilessly. But in the next second, 33's expression suddenly changed. Because there were some subtle changes in the female voice he heard. "We've come to this point, and you still don't want to believe me." This voice, 33's eyes suddenly widened, and he asked somewhat incoherently, Kaylan, did you hear what she just said?" "I heard it." Kaylan glanced at 33 with some confusion, not understanding why 33's expression had changed so much in such a short period of time when he had just looked disdainful. "What did she say?" "Please repeat it quickly," 33 said urgently. "It says, you don't believe me, do you?" "Wrong." "What's wrong? Isn't that what you heard?" Kaylan frowned slightly. "No. But the meaning is close, but that sentence is exactly the same as that time." A look of pain appeared on 33's face. "As for the tone and intonation, have there been any changes from the beginning?" "No." Kaylan shook his head. "What did it say to you?" "It's already reached this point, and you still don't want to believe me, you still don't want to believe me." 33 shook his head in disbelief. "It's exactly the same." "What exactly?" "The timbre, tone, and intonation are exactly the same, and even the sentences themselves are word for word." 33 whispered, 11 years ago, a person said such a sentence to me." "Has it read your memory?" Kaylan suddenly felt wary. If the opponent really had this ability, it would be more difficult. In front of such an opponent, he would have no secrets at all. This feeling of having someone see through your underwear is extremely uncomfortable. The first time Kaylan was mind-read was deep in the sick village. Fortunately, Chiron was not his enemy at that time. Then came Ziluo and Valentina. These two people were even more worthy of Kaylan. Someone you trust, but Nieto is different. "No. I should have forgotten this memory, but now, I have remembered it all." 33 clenched his fists and narrated in a low voice, "Her name is Tina, and she said this to me." "The name of the person who said this is Tina." "Tina." Kaylan relied on his amazing memory to review 33's files, and then tentatively asked, "It's Second Lieutenant Tina, Lawrence. When you were serving in the 4th Armored Group, you spent 3 months in her team." "Yes, it's her." 33 whispered, "Speaking of which, I'm not afraid of your jokes. The first time I saw her, I should have fallen in love with her. Even though I was working in the field at that time, the Legion prohibits officers and soldiers below the school level from falling in love with people in the army during their service, but in fact, very few people abide by that rule. In the flames of war, not only brotherhood is born, but also love. In the first few years after Ark landed on Alpha Planet, Due to excessive losses of male soldiers, the Field Corps had to recruit a large number of female soldiers to fill the vacancies. The ratio of male soldiers to female soldiers once reached 1:1, until New Era 944. 10 years later, all the female soldiers who joined the army were approaching retirement age, and the proportion of female soldiers in the army was decreasing year by year. I know Kaylan nodded. Even now, there are still about 25% female soldiers in the Field Corps. Although most of them are engaged in logistics or clerical work, this proportion is still higher than that of other countries in the old era. The proportion of female soldiers in the military is much higher. It is not uncommon for male and female officers and soldiers to fall in love in the army. After all, the normal retirement age without special circumstances, such as disability, etc., is over 40 years old. Not everyone will get married before joining the army. If you want to naturally, the only way to solve the problem of being single is in the army. As for the rule that prohibits officers and soldiers below the school level from falling in love, it is actually just a piece of paper. Especially for female officers and soldiers, this age happens to be the best years of their lives. It is almost impossible for them to wait until they are 40 years old to find their significant other. Except for one type of force, that is, the special forces that perform the most difficult tasks and have the highest sacrifice rate. The 1st Mobile Group of the 4th Armored Group, to which Sanchezan and Tina belong, is one such special force. This does not mean that officers and soldiers of the special forces are strictly prohibited from falling in love. They can do so, but not with people in their own team, because there have been precedents for this kind of thing. Couples are unwilling to abandon each other, which ultimately leads to the failure of the mission. The entire army was wiped out. For this kind of special forces, the mission is the first priority, and reason must override emotions. For the commander, what he needs is a group of emotionless fighting machines, not a group of ordinary people who are stymied by the love between their children. Within a month, I established a relationship with her, but no one in the 1st Mobile Group knew about our relationship, because we never appeared to be too close in front of others, or even interacted too much. 33 continued. Until now, I'm not sure whether it's because of love, or simply because I need a woman to give me physical comfort. This is normal. The officers and soldiers in the front-line combat troops are under a lot of mental pressure. In order to relieve this mental pressure, they will choose some relatively ordinary methods. Maybe she just wants to vent. Kaylan Shun, he continued as 33 said. Kaylan knew very well that this incident was most likely caused by 33's psychological shadow. The 1st Mobile Team of the 4th Armored Battalion was severely damaged during the last mission. 37 people in the team, including team leader Tina, 34 people including Lawrence were killed, and only 3 survived. 33 was one of the 3 who survived. Subsequently, the designation of the 1st Mobile Group of the 4th Armored Group was cancelled, and 33rd was incorporated into the later Velociraptor team after recovering from his injuries. He should have witnessed the death of Tina Lawrence with his own eyes, and the reason why Nieto imitated what Tina Lawrence said to him was most likely to break through 33's psychological defenses. That was the last thing she said to me. 33's voice became deeper and deeper. At that time, we were already in a desperate situation. Half of us were dead, and almost everyone in the remaining half was dead wounded. There are no friendly units nearby that can be contacted, and the only vehicles that can still be driven are a 6-wheeled armored off-road vehicle and a Walker Mecha, and under the high ground where we are stationed, an enemy 1,000 times more powerful than us. That Walker was driven by 2nd Lieutenant Tina. Although Kaylan only glanced at Tina's file, he clearly remembered that Tina's position in the army was a tactical mecha pilot. The equipment configuration of the 1st Mobile Group does include 4 old model Walker Mechas. Yes, at that time, we had been fighting hard for 3 days and 3 nights, and were about to run out of ammunition and food. 33 recalled. I remember that Tina's command error directly led to the death of the Black Bear and Tree. She and I had more than one quarrel between battles because of the loss of 3 walkers from Demon and Snowstorm. Kaylan did not interrupt 33 and asked him to continue, but now that I think about it, maybe I wouldn't be able to do better than her. Everyone hasn't slept for 3 days. It's all because of I would take stimulants to hold on, and when the effects of the stimulants were over and the side effects and strong drowsiness came over, I would take another injection with a larger dose. In that case, I was still asking for her command. Any deviation? Things have happened. It's not your fault. Kaylan patted San's shoulder, you're just too anxious. She ordered us to abandon our position, but I yelled at her. I told her that as soon as our heavy firepower stopped, the indigenous creatures gathered at the bottom of the steep slope would climb up on the corpses of their own kind and tear us apart. Fragments, we don't have time to retreat at all. 33 paused, then, she told me that she would be responsible for breaking up the rear, and let me take the remaining people away. Kaylan pursed his lips. In fact, before 33 said it, he had roughly guessed the development of the matter. I was stunned for a while, and then she said this to me. 33 took off the breathing mask, rubbed his face vigorously, took several deep breaths, and then allowed his tone to be exhausted. Possibly remained calm. That was also the last thing she said to me. I know that Tina is a very important person to you, but I still have to tell you that the Tina Lawrence you knew has died. Kaylan looked directly at 33 and said, now this guy imitating her voice, tone, and lines is just a jerk trying to play with your emotions. It's also extremely disrespectful to the dead ensign Tina. No matter what it says, ignore it. I know. 33 nodded numbly. Just when I was telling you these things, Tina, no, that guy named Nieto, she has been with me. I imitated Tina's voice and talked to me in my ear, and she said all the things Tina had said to me before. It seems that it has chosen you as a breakthrough point. Kaylan said solemnly, this is a method of attacking the mind, but it will not have any effect on Kaylan. As a symbiote, only a series of false memories. After knowing that his previous memories were artificially implanted by the undead crew, Kaylan had no feeling about those memories. Looking back, it was like watching a movie where the protagonist and himself grew up. It's just like a movie. As for those people Kaylan cares about, if Nieto imitates the voices of Zofia or Hound and talks to him, he will never believe it. First of all, Zofia and the others are still alive, and Kaylan does not exist at all. What is difficult to calm down? Secondly, reason will tell Kaylan that there is no way they can appear in this place. What he hears, sees, and even touches may be just hallucinations. I think so, but... 33 suddenly paused when he said this. Then, he actually raised his head and looked towards the dome. Soon enough, Kaylan struck 30 San directly on the shoulder with a hand knife, then suppressed him to the floor with a standard grappling movement, and pressed his face tightly with the other hand. On the floor. What's going on? 33 who was attacked did not speak first, but the attacker Kaylan asked. She told me, the moonlight is beautiful, let me look up. 33 said with some difficulty. Tina also told me this sentence, when we first, secretly dated. The moonlight is beautiful comes from an allusion by the Japanese writer Natsume Soseki in the old era. It is used to implicitly express the meaning of I love you, but now people on the Ark should not say this. The moonlight is beautiful. Many people have never even heard of the name Natsume Soseki. This kind of expression can only be used by some niche literary and artistic youths. Be awake, the sky above Alpha Star is filled with radiation clouds. You can't see the moon at all at night. You can only see two blurry shadows, emitting a faint light behind the clouds. Kaylan said in a loud voice, I just want to trick you into looking up. P.S. I don't know if you have noticed a detail when Kaylan mentioned Nieto, he used it as the pronoun, but Nieto in 33's mouth used she. Please analyze the role of this point in the text. Reading comprehension question, 10 points, Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 906. You don't believe me either, right? The female voice that Kaylan heard finally changed somewhat, but what surprised Kaylan was that the voice she heard was not the Zofia Soma he expected. Instead, her voice became that of Afterota, the sixth lover of the immortal crew. "Why should I believe it?" Kaylan sneered. "Didn't you go through all the trouble to come here to seek the truth?" said the voice. "Now the truth you want to know is drawn on this dome. As long as you raise your head, you can see it." "A cheap trick," Kaylan said disdainfully and spat on the ground. "Aren't you telling me this just to trick me into looking up at the dome? If you sincerely want to tell me the truth, then why bother? To search for the truth, you must pay a price. Do you know that there was a thinker called Confucius during the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period in ancient China? He once said, 'He who hears the Tao in the morning will die at night,' and the fate of this universe compared with the truth, human life is too short and insignificant, you only need a simple action to touch the supreme truth. Compared with this, life is insignificant." The other party suddenly changed the subject. "Or are you afraid of death, and would rather live in the world, spending this short life in ignorance and ordinariness? No, you should not be that kind of person. If you are, I wouldn't come to this place. Is there a possibility that I had no choice but to plunge into this poor place?" Kaylan suddenly laughed. "There was once a person who used similar conditions to seduce me. What kind of body? Eternal life, endless knowledge, the truth of the universe. He has several more chips than you. Do you know what his final outcome will be?" "You cut off his head," the other person said calmly. "It seems you can really read my memory." Kaylan flattened his mouth. He didn't say who the person he mentioned was the whole time, but based on this little information, the manager of Shangcheng district, he had already guessed that he was referring to the prophet of the heretical sect. "Since you know," Kaylan continued, "then you know that this kind of temptation is of no use to me. That person talked for so long, but in the end he couldn't even save his own life, let alone the truth of the universe. Even physical immortality is impossible. Do you think I would still believe this? What he told you is just a blank check. It's not trustworthy even if he can't do it himself," the voice said, "but I'm different. I've already put what you want in your life in front of you, all you need to do is raise your head. Since you have put what I want in front of me, can you please be a good person and go to the end, send the Buddha to the west, take off the things on top, and put them in front of me in a real sense, huh? My cervical spine is not very good and I can't lift my head up." Since the other party insisted, Kaylan simply started rolling around. Judging from the current situation, the managers of this uptown area should not be able to force them to look up at the dome. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had to change its voice and use all its words to trick Kaylan and San. At least, for now, it is unable to interfere with the two of them through physical means. As for the direction in which things will develop next, Kaylan can only take one step at a time. Although he is still wary of Nieto, the manager of the lower city district, it does not mean that he does not believe what the other party says. Stability does not mean coward. What's more, this Nieto of the upper city district, if you want to look up at the dome in such a hurry, there must be a big problem. Do you know why that person told you that as long as you join the heretical sect, you can have those things? Seeing Ian's indifference, Nieto immediately changed the subject and began to talk about the person who had already the prophet beheaded by Kaylan. "You said, I'm listening. As for whether you believe it or not, that's my own business," Kaylan said while checking 33's condition. 33 had calmed down at this time, with only the heartbeat and the breathing rate is slightly faster. Kaylan knew that when this Nieto communicated with him, he must also say something in 33's ears that only he could hear. However, when the big move of "the moonlight is beautiful" was used by Kaylan, after Lan interrupted, no matter how much he said, it might not be as lethal as the previous two sentences. 33, who was almost fooled, was already on guard. The two King bombers at the beginning had no success, and the subsequent 3-on-3 attacks were naturally unable to break through 33's defense. However, just to be on the safe side, Kaylan took out a tranquilizer from the first aid kit and injected it into 33. "How's it going? Are you okay now?" Kaylan asked in a low voice. "It's not bad." 33 nodded. "Sorry, I just... It's okay. From now on, you just need to remember one thing. No matter what happens, no matter what the voice says to you, don't look up." Kaylan ordered. "As long as we don't look up ourselves, that voice can't do anything to us." While Kaylan was talking to 33, the voice of the uptown manager Nieto was still reaching his ears. "Are you really not curious about what happened to that person?" "I'm not curious," Kaylan said expressionlessly. "He is already dead. What does his past have to do with me? You should know very well that you and he are the same kind of people. The plot that happened to him will probably happen again to you. Believe it or not, I'm suing you for defamation. Comparing me to that bastard is the biggest insult to me." Kaylan didn't raise his head, but raised his right hand and made a sign to the dome. "International friendly gesture. At least I won't be like that bastard and don't take human life seriously. It's just that you haven't reached the point where a single choice will lead to the loss of tens of millions of lives. The more you experience that kind of thing, the more you will feel numb to the loss of life," the other party said. "How ignorant are human beings? Creatures, only individuals who have touched the truth are worthy of survival. As for other people, what is the meaning of their short decades of life? In the thousands of years of human civilization, countless people have been born in this world, live a long or short life, and then die. Is there ever any meaning? Because you can't defeat me, you started to use sophistry, right?" Kaylan raised his other hand and raised his second middle finger. "Your rhetoric may be able to impress those guys from the Undead Crew Association, but to me, it's useless. Then you should know that that person is a symbiote just like you. This is your biggest similarity. You have cultivated so many symbiotes, and the only two individuals that can survive stably for a long time are you two. The same people are divided into great men, saints and scum. Do you think a person with a normal mind would classify those great men who have left their names in history and the notorious scum into the same category? Let alone categorization. Even mentioning it together will make people feel bad." Kaylan put down his hands, helped Sanchezan up from the ground, and walked towards the door of the garbage treatment plant. "If you are unwilling to tell me the so-called truth directly, but insist on me to see some broken dome, then forgive me for not accompanying you. I will find out what I want to know myself, so don't bother me." Kaylan said to himself. "Oh, by the way, although you are the manager of Shangcheng District, I think you have lost control of Shangcheng District, right? Even the one with the same name as you in Lower City District. Everyone can force me out of this hive city, but you can only keep hiding in a corner and talking, trying your best to make me raise my head. Isn't it that you only have one mouth left? You have such a venomous mouth." 33 twitched the corner of his mouth. "It's full of sarcasm." "It won't care about this." Kaylan let out a long breath. "I'm not trying to ridicule it, I just want to make myself happy." "That's right, I don't feel offended. As a being who has been fortunate enough to touch the truth of the universe, how can I have emotional fluctuations because of human words?" Before the voice could finish speaking, Kaylan interrupted it. "Do you know there is a saying on the human internet? It's called 'be serious and you will lose.' If you don't respond to me, then I can basically..." "I'm sure you really ignored my sarcasm, but you have to explain this. Don't you think it's a bit cover-up? Or, are you deliberately suppressing your anger? But then again, the intelligent biocomputers, does AI really have emotions?" It seemed that he could not refute Ian's words. This time, the other party actually remained silent. "Are you really an AI? Or a nest resident swallowed by disaster?" Kaylan asked. "I used to be, but now, after bringing together the thinking consciousness of everyone in the entire upper city of the Hive City, I have become a higher form of life form. The computing power of human brains is far less than mine. Why do you think that I can't have the emotions that humans can have? Then you just admit that you were really angry at what I said just now. There is no point in arguing about such trivial matters, since you don't agree that that person is the same as you. I won't force you. But there is one thing you are lying: you care about what that person has experienced in the past. Care very much. So what? Do you know? Kaylan put his hands behind his head, bowed his head slightly, and stared at his toes that were moving forward. You should have the ability to read our memories, right? Even I can. How can you know what you don't know? Or, you can see those things, hidden in the fog. This is like Zelo's sense of immediate sight. Through the sense of immediate sight, Kaylan and Sansan can only see things that the residents of the Nest City saw back then. The same goes for Nieto. The only things that can be stolen from their memories are things they have seen or experienced before. If those things didn't exist in their memories at all, how could it be stolen? The only thing that makes Kaylan a little worried is the memory fragments sealed in the depths of his mind, those things shrouded in fog, but Ian's subconscious keeps telling him that those memory fragments have not been stolen by anyone moved. If the memory fragments are read, whether it is unlocked by Kaylan himself or stolen by other consciousnesses, he will have a subtle feeling, but this feeling has been there since he entered the third level of the Hive City. It had never appeared before, and he was basically certain that Nieto should not be able to see those sealed memory fragments. Of course I know what that person has experienced, because he has also been here, the other party said unhurriedly. Has the Prophet been here too? This is nothing to be surprised about. After all, he can also read the Alpha Civilization's text, and has explored so many ruins with the help of the heretical section. It is entirely possible to follow the clues and find this place. Kaylan rubbed his chin. It had been almost a week since he had washed his hands properly. The originally short stubble on his chin had now grown to half a centimeter long. Kaylan thought about it and raised his fingernails. A thin layer of space blades immediately appeared on the front end of his body, and his beard was completely shaved off in a few swipes. Although Zelo's space power is blocked and cannot be released outside the body, it is still no problem to attach it to Ian's fingertips and use it to shave his beard. Did the Prophet look up at the dome? He saw it, so he felt that human life is meaningless, and if you want to pursue the truth, you must give it up. Wait a minute, Kaylan interrupted the other party again. Since he has seen it, why is he still pulling his hips like that? Not only was the ark built by ignorant humans not destroyed, but it was chopped off by me. If you kill your head, according to that, the thing on the dome shouldn't be of any use, right? It is difficult for me to describe the truth of the universe to you in words. The language of human civilization is too low level, and the amount of information contained in a sentence is like a drop in the ocean in front of the truth of the universe. What about Alpha Civilization's language? It's also not qualified, Kaylan asked tentatively. The language of Alpha Civilization is a leap forward compared to human language. If human language is compared to a 3.5-inch floppy disk that can only store text documents, then the language of Alpha Civilization has a capacity of just a few hundred TB supermobile hard drive. The gap between the two is extremely huge. That language also doesn't work. Then, since the truth of the universe cannot be described in words, then disaster should be able to, right? The guy on the second floor refused to tell me what happened in this hive, but I think you don't have this kind of restricted, right? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 907. Disaster? No, only ignorant people would call it a disaster, the voice said. This is not a disaster at all, but his mercy and gift to lower creatures. Those people who could only live for a few decades and do nothing could be lucky enough to become a part of him, gain eternal life and the supreme status in the universe. Can this be considered a disaster? I finally understand. Did you learn the Prophet's stupid rhetoric from here? He did stay here for a while. Then why wasn't he swallowed up by the disaster? Well, according to you, why didn't he fall into the arms of that great god and become one with him? Kaylan asked. He once considered this choice, but he finally decided to become a messenger of gods and guide more people to become the food of that great god. Kaylan interrupted the other party again. Okay, stop talking nonsense and just tell me if you can tell me what happened in the Nest City. That's fine. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it's that simple. If you want to know everything, just raise your head. Kaylan said in a very calm and elegant tone, you can shut up now. The other party seemed to really obey Ian's request. After Kaylan said this, he stopped making any sound. The suddenly quiet environment made Kaylan feel a little uncomfortable. Neither the managers of the lower city nor the upper city were willing to reveal more information to him, which made Kaylan feel a little disappointed. If one of the two Nietos has been eroded to such an extent, after passing the critical point, there is no doubt that it should be the Nieto in the upper city. As for what is on the dome, in fact, Kaylan is also very curious, but he will never raise his head to look unless it is absolutely necessary. This is a risky move, and it is a move that the managers of Shangcheng district really want to see themselves play. In the conversation just now, the other party's purpose was so clear that there was almost no concealment. No matter what Kaylan asked, the other party would always there is only one answer, let Kaylan raise his head and look at the dome. If the managers of the upper city are really sincere in the slightest, at least they can always tell themselves how the hive was destroyed through oral accounts. Even the last survivors of the hive can use their notes to describe those events. Written descriptions mean that the disaster is not something that cannot be described using language and words. The survivors and the Nieto in the lower city did not want to explain because they were afraid of the further spread of the disaster, but what was this Nieto in the upper city? It obviously admires disaster very much. In this case, why not just tell the whole thing to itself? If this information contains forbidden knowledge, wouldn't it just deepen one's own erosion? Isn't this exactly what the other party wants to see? From conventional logic, this makes little sense. 33, is that guy still bothering you? Kaylan looked at 33 and asked. 33 shook his head. No, she really shut up after you told her to shut up just now. So obedient, Kaylan muttered, or, is this guy planning something else? Kaylan, there's actually one thing I haven't been able to figure out, 33 said. If she wants us to see the dome so much, why doesn't she put mirrors around it? In this way, even if we don't looking up, the moment we leave the passage, we will unconsciously see the dome through the mirror reflection. It is much easier to do this. There is no need to use words to trick us into looking up, right? I don't know, maybe it can't do it. I think its current situation may be worse than we imagined. There is a high probability that it has lost control of the upper city area, Kaylan analyzed. This is best, to save her from setting a lot of traps for us. 33 said, what should we do now? Find the managers on this floor. Well, let's find out its identity first. Kaylan nodded. Although there are some huge differences between upper city and lower city, the block divisions and urban structure are mirror images of each other. According to the lower city's nirvana, the location of the square where to is should be this location. On the wall of the garbage treatment plant, there is a simple structural diagram of Shangcheng district. From the picture, you can see that in addition to luxurious commercial and residential areas, Shangcheng district also has a large man-made forest and an artificial rockery about 300 meters above sea level. The peak of this rockery is located in the center of the forest, and the forest separates the east and west sides of the entire upper city, forming a gray-green isolation belt. According to the markings on the map, the eastern half belongs to dozens of small and medium-sized families, while the entire western half belongs to the sphere of influence of one family. The family emblem is a family emblem made of dozens of large and small pieces. A kite-shaped shield composed of small gears of various sizes, with a circle of thorny thorns wrapped around the outer edge of the shield, full of retro artistic flavor, and full of the power and mechanical sense unique to the industrial age. As for the square where Nieto is located, the location directly opposite it happens to be in the core area of the family's sphere of influence. You said these badges represent each family. After listening to K. Ian's explanation, 33 stared at the map with a strange expression and muttered, "This is quite similar to the Ark." In the eyes of ordinary people, the top level of power is a group of powerful people, but in fact only those who have climbed to a high enough level know that there are real rulers above these powerful people. The real rulers on the Ark refer to the undead crew, and in the Hive, they naturally refer to the people living on the fourth level of Cloud Top. Actually, I'm quite puzzled. This group of people has reached the point where they need to hide in underground shelters. Why can they still maintain such a high level of life? The uptown area is consuming the necessary supplies for survival at a rate that can be compared to arrogance and extravagance. There is no need to describe it in detail. One day's consumption in the upper city area can probably meet the basic needs of the lower city area and the bottom nest for a whole year. There is even more, 33 said while trying to make an expression that could express his thoughts, but he tried several times and finally gave up. He sighed, shook his head, frowned and said, "Is this hive really a shelter?" Shelters, as the name suggests, are survival fortifications built to avoid disasters. Even if those high-end shelters for the rich are as luxurious as mansions, they still cannot change the essence of the shelter. A shelter, the most important thing is the reserve of materials. If no long-term planning is done, a shelter with abundant material reserves will eventually be turned into a tomb or abandoned. Although the hive is large in area, its productivity is not strong, and many things cannot be self-sufficient. In this case, even the rich and powerful must try to save as much as possible, instead of living a more wasteful life than the wealthy class on the earth in the old era, as Kaylan and the others saw. Take the Ark as an example. Although the history of those noble families can be traced back to the interstellar drifting era or even the old era, before the Ark landed on Alpha and human society entered the stable period of the new era, the living conditions of these nobles were not good. Especially in the first few years after landing on Alpha Planet, even the young masters and ladies from wealthy families tightened their belts and invested precious and limited resources in places that needed them most. At that time, the biggest difference between the rich and the poor on the Ark was probably limited to personal safety and basic food and clothing. For example, ordinary people could only get 1 bag of synthetic food a day, while nobles probably could 2-3 bags, maybe 1 more bag of mustard. Many aristocratic people over 50 years old often lament when they recall the life of that era. A canned luncheon meat that was almost entirely filled with starch and synthetic fats was shared among the family, and they had to eat it for a week. This is something that is simply unimaginable to the young masters and ladies born after the 930th year of the new era. Perhaps, they don't lack resources. Kaylan relaxedly rubbed the pads of his thumb and middle finger and thought, although the entire nest is now sealed under the sea, when they take the initiative to sink the nest to the bottom of the sea, before, the hive city was not in a completely closed state. They even sent out ground exploration teams regularly, although the survival rate of these exploration teams was appallingly low. Well, if only they could get a job as a ground exploration team. Just report the document. Kaylan suddenly had a doubt in his heart. Is the ice era really frozen as it literally means? Or is it just a reference? Just like the word disaster that appeared most frequently in conversations with Nieto. In fact, there are extremely abundant materials on the surface of the earth, but for some reasons, people have to huddle underground. A picture like this popped up in K. Ian's mind. On the surface of Alpha Planet, a large number of automated production facilities are scattered everywhere, and all kinds of living resources are continuously produced from the factory assembly lines, and manufacturing. The humans who had forgotten all this hid in the underground hive. They could only send out a small team of people every once in a while to bring the things produced by these automatic factories back to the hive, and for some reason, the people who performed this task, team members, have an extremely high loss rate. From a certain perspective, they are like the fuel used by vehicles transporting supplies, and they are a consumable. But since we have adopted fully automated production, why not simply set up a fully automated transportation line to directly deliver the materials produced on the surface to the hive capital? No matter what, how about using robots to replace living people? Although selecting a ground exploration team from the bottom nest is the cheapest option, it is also the least stable option. No one can be sure whether this temporarily formed team with varying qualities can complete the task. No one can guarantee that every member of every team will be loyal to their duties and do their best to complete their tasks as consumables. There were too many unreasonable things, but Ian's subconscious told him over and over again that the picture he just imagined was very close to the truth. Many things in the past have proved to Kaylan the accuracy of this subconscious that appears from time to time. It is better to say that it is subconscious, but it is better to say that it is the things sealed deep in his mind that are at work, and the memory fragments that are directly unlocked are different. The subconscious mind will not tell Kaylan the answer directly, but it will tell Kaylan whether the option is correct or wrong when he does the multiple choice question. Let's go, Kaylan said to 33, at our current location, we have to pass through the eastern half of the area first, and then pass through this artificial forest. I'm afraid we will inevitably encounter a battle, and without Zelo's assistance in the case of... How are you sure that you will encounter a battle? Haven't the managers at this level already lost control of the nest? 33 asked curiously. Do you know what the rich and powerful like to do most when they are bored? Have a banquet or a party? 33 was stunned for a moment and said tentatively, don't look at me like that. I have been a soldier for most of my life. After I retired, I was either running a small restaurant or exploring ruins. How do I know? Those daily activities of upper-class society. It's hunting, Kaylan said. In the old era, whether in the East or the West, the aristocracy was extremely keen on hunting. Many countries would dedicate a large area as a hunting park to satisfy the needs of the aristocracy. Demand. And in this man-made forest, there is a quite large area marked as a hunting ground. You mean, there may still be a group of prey surviving in this hunting ground? 33 followed Ian's words, no. It should be said that they are the descendants of that batch of prey, but after experiencing the effects of disasters and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and mutation, those who can still survive must be some extremely perverted monsters. It's quite troublesome just thinking about it. Yes. This is what I am more worried about, Kaylan nodded. Although the tunnel dwellers have also mutated, they have not been affected by disasters in essence. According to my inference, the outbreak in Shangcheng district that year, the disaster should be more serious than the lower city area and the bottom nest. What we will encounter on this level, it's hard to say. Don't be so pessimistic. Both the lower nest and the lower city have been emptied. Maybe the upper city is also empty. Hundreds of thousands have passed. Even if they are eroded bones, they should have turned into dust long ago. There is one thing that we have never been confirmed by, Kaylan said solemnly, and a bold idea suddenly appeared in his head. 33, you said, when humans, or, can a certain organism retain its fertility after the erosion reaches a critical point and turns into a corpse? It's really hard to say. 33 took a breath of cold air. Unless the group of lunatics at the research institute caught the living corpse samples, with their weird brain circuits, maybe they could still. I will really give it a try. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 908. The layout of the buildings in the upper city is much more reasonable than that in the lower city and bottom nest, and the streets are wider and cleaner. Hundreds of thousands of years have passed, and there is not even much dust on the ground. But this was quickly explained. After Kaylan and Sanzan-san walked around an intersection, they happened to see an automatic cleaning robot approaching from a distance. The shape of this robot was like a robot lying on the ground. The giant ladybug will suck the garbage and dust on the ground wherever it passes into the robot's abdomen, and then it will spray a gel preparation used to maintain the road surface from its tail, which will crack the road surface due to long-term disrepair. The gaps are filled. The white paint on the robot's surface has peeled off in large areas, revealing the rusty metal shell underneath, but you must know that more than 500,000 years have passed since this automatic cleaning robot was created. Not only has it not transformed into a pile of rotten iron, but it can still start and work normally. This in itself is enough to make people shocked. This robot seemed to have a built-in sensing device. When it was only 10 meters away from Kaylan and Sansan, it began to slow down, then stopped, and began to emit a beep warning sound. The warning light on the top it also began to flash a dazzling red light with a warning tone. No wonder the streets are so clean, but then again, this thing should have been out of the factory for hundreds of thousands of years, right? If the managers of Shangcheng district have lost control of the hive city, then the daily maintenance and energy consumption of this robot will problems and the replenishment of road repair gel. How are these problems solved? Is it all automated? 33 walked around the automatic cleaning robot and said in wonder. Maybe Kaylan stepped away from the front of the automatic cleaning robot. The warning sound quickly disappeared, and the robot returned to normal operation and continued to move forward along the street. Should we search the upper city area again? 33 asked Kaylan as he watched the robot disappear at the corner of the intersection. The residential area is too large, and it will take a lot of time to search. Kaylan thought for a while and rejected the proposal, although the Nieto on this floor seemed to have disappeared and stopped making a sound. Kaylan always felt that the other party seemed to be planning something. As time passed, Ian's inexplicable feeling of uneasiness continued to grow. Perhaps we can only search for those landmark buildings, which shouldn't take much time, 33 suggested. Iconic building, which one are you referring to? Kaylan asked. This. 33 looked around and was stunned. Although the buildings in the upper city are all luxurious, the biggest problem is that in this eastern half of the district, the luxurious residences of various families are almost the same, and it is difficult to find outstanding landmark buildings. On the contrary, in the western half of the area on the other side, there are many unique buildings in the family-controlled area with the gear, thorns, and shield as the family emblem. Search for a nearby house first. If nothing is found, go directly to the forest area. Kaylan made a decision. The two pushed open the door of the nearest manor, and what they encountered was an artificial lake covering an area of at least 2 acres. Although the lake water had dried up, the bottom of the lake, which was not regularly cleaned by automatic robots, was also covered with thick. There is a layer of dust, but Kaylan can still imagine the sparkling scene of this artificial lake in the past. As far as this artificial lake is concerned, this manor is much more impressive than the main house of the Williams family that Kaylan had copied before. No matter how powerful the Williams family is, it will be difficult for them to win over every inch of land. Such a landscape lake was built in the West 3rd District purely for viewing. I can sense that there is a load-bearing frame made of nano alloy buried at the bottom of the lake. 33 tooted. It's really a luxury. Our warships have to use nano alloy in proportions. These people, actually using so many precious materials in such a meaningless place, just to prevent the lake bottom from sinking. The two did not take a detour, but chose the shortest straight path, crossing directly from the bottom of the lake. On the other side of the artificial lake are rows of 4-story villas. These villas are like the outer walls of a castle, enclosing the largest main house in the center, but now more than half of these villas have collapsed. The height of the ruins was not even half a floor. Kaylan looked directly across the ruins and saw the innermost main house, which had been eroded by time and only had a frame left. The internal structure of the main house can be seen at a glance. Whether it is furniture or daily items used by the owner of the house, they have disappeared. Compared with the hive itself, which is full of irrationalities, these dilapidated buildings are actually bringing Kaylan back to reality. This sanctuary is at least 500,000 years old. Even if there is no wind or rain here, such a long time is enough to turn most things into dust. It is surprising enough that the archaeological work of the old era can find a document and antiquities dating back thousands of years. As for the relics from 500,000 years ago, even if the words are directly engraved on steel, without excellent preservation due to the environment, steel will also rust and rot, not to mention those things recorded on stones, bamboo chips, cloth or papyrus. Even with the iteration of technology, people began to use more advanced data carriers, but the most commonly used electronic storage devices on the Ark would have been degaussed long ago if they had been left there without maintenance for 500,000 years. It is simply impossible to extract documents that have been stored. Not to mention not even a single character will be left. Weird, so weird. 33 glanced at the skeleton-like house frames, shaking his head repeatedly. Kaylan, don't you think there is a place that is weird? Well, it's very strange. Kaylan nodded and agreed. The upper city is indeed more luxurious than the lower city and the bottom nest, but only in terms of the scale of the ruins. If it is replaced by the degree of preservation of the buildings, this place is much more dilapidated than the other two floors. This is what the ruins of 500,000 years ago should look like. 33 whispered. As for the lower city and the bottom nest, if I insist on it, I feel that it will not even exist in 1,000 years. It is so well preserved that even the bed made of thin iron pipes is still there. In 500,000 years, that kind of thing should have corroded to the point where no slag is left. Could it be that time has stopped flowing? Kaylan muttered. He had long known that the Alpha civilization had the technology to control the flow of time. Among other things, the Nameless Island was a good example, so he could not send out the nest. There are completely different time flow rates between the bottom nest of the capital and the lower and upper city areas. Kaylan subconsciously lowered his head and glanced at the mechanical watch on his wrist. The second hand was ticking and the hour and minute hands stayed where they should. He compared it with the watch and electronic timer worn by 33. It was basically confirmed that there was no abnormality in time after they entered the nest city. What's more, Ze-Logo's power was not restricted when he was in the bottom nest and Zayakan area. If there was an abnormality in the flow of time, Ze-Logo, who was extremely sensitive to time and space, would be able to detect the problem immediately. But Ze-Logo didn't find anything wrong. Unless, the abnormal power that caused everyone to be separated in the grey fog forest appeared again, erasing Kaylan, Sansan, and even Ze-Logo's memories of the part where time flowed abnormally, even in an extremely incredible way. Tampered with all timers. No. That kind of power should only be effective on ordinary people. Otherwise, I should also be affected by it. Kaylan thought for a moment and then rejected this possibility. If even his own memory is really erased, there is actually no point in delving into this matter. That kind of power is simply not something he can resist, and that feeling of powerlessness is just like what the Alpha civilization faces when they face it. The same great god that I believe in. Could it be that Zayakan and Daikeo were rebuilt later? 33 guessed. In the old era, people would also repair and rebuild some monuments to serve as museums or tourist attractions. Maybe, Alpha did people repair and strengthen the lower city and the bottom nest tens of thousands of years ago. As for why the upper city has not been rebuilt, perhaps it has something to do with what is above our heads now. 33 pointed at the dome directly above. The meaning of his words was self-evident. Although the two of them never raised their heads to look at it, they both knew in their hearts that there must be something above the dome. Just one glance would completely lead things in an uncontrollable direction. Forget it, let's not worry about this for now. It seems that these mansions are all the same and have no search value. Kaylan said, let's go directly to the forest. The two of them returned to the street along the original path, and then followed the shortest route to the artificial forest in the center of the uptown area. Compared with the dilapidated buildings, this forest looked full of life. A large number of trees and shrubs that Kaylan couldn't even name were piled up in layers, replacing several forest paths marked on the original map. All the trails are buried. From the outside, this doesn't look like a man-made forest at all, but a completely undeveloped virgin forest. In 500,000 years, climate and geological changes were enough to transform a barren land into a dense rainforest. Perhaps this forest is no longer the same forest as the original man-made forest. There is nothing to say about this. But there was one thing that made Kaylan slightly concerned. These trees are not illegal structures in the bottom nest, they are alive. Logically speaking, such a wildly growing forest will not take 500,000 years, but only 50 years, enough to cover most of the upper city area. But now it seems that no matter how long these plants grow, they have never crossed the boundary drawn on the ground. Even the crown part of the tree has not exceeded the boundary. It's like there is an invisible spatial barrier that limits their growth space. But after actual investigation, Kaylan discovered that there was no spatial barrier at the boundary between the forest and the residential area. He entered back and forth at the boundary without any hindrance at all. Don't you think this place is very similar to the core area of the gray mist forest? No matter how dense the fog is, it will not invade that square even half an inch. The same is true here. No matter how dense the trees are, they will not invade even half an inch. Probably some kind of restrictive measures are still in effect, just like the automatic cleaning robot that is still operating, Kaylan responded. Speaking of which, that robot is weird enough. The buildings are in such a state of decay, but the chip inside the robot is still working. I think we should follow the robot to investigate, or simply take it apart. 33 said. Let's explore the forest first. I think there may be more to gain in the western half. As Kaylan said that, he walked towards the forest. However, after taking a few steps, an electric current suddenly burst out from the depths of his mind, and a familiar feeling surged up again. Wait a minute, Kaylan raised his hand to signal 33 to stand where he was. This place, there are memory fragments activated in my brain again. This forest can also trigger your memory fragments. Although 33 was a little shocked, there was a hint of joy on his face, and he was with the Nieto who liked to tell riddles and the Nieto who kept asking them to look up. Compared with Trust, Ian's memory fragments are much more reliable. Since entering the nest, the most important and detailed information they have obtained is precisely provided by Ian's memory fragments. What did you see? 33 asked anxiously. A man with a crude weapon. The memory fragments triggered by Kaylan this time were similar to Zeelo's sense of instant vision. He could clearly see that 30 meters away from him, under a big tree that was as thick as 4 or 5 people could hug it. Leaning against a panting young man. Although that location is now filled with a large number of shrubs, Kaylan can still see a virtual shadow staying at that location through the shrubs in reality. Different from Zeelo's sense of instant vision, the characters in Ian's memory fragments did not have that kind of blurry fog. He could clearly see that this was a human being who was exactly the same as an earthling. From the body shape and appearance judging from the above, this young man is about 18 to 25 years old. He wears a style that is a little weird compared to the ordinary residents of the Ark, but is very ordinary compared to the fancy clothes at the fashion exhibition. He was wearing pure white clothes and trousers, holding a hunting knife that seemed to be a modified Gurkha saber in his hand, leaning against the tree trunk, breathing heavily. P.S. Thanks to Reading Giraffe and Sopudeong for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to Mo Deo Chu, Juhuan, Book Friends 202012032100267758, and H. Han Baobao for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi San. Chapter 909. The hem of this male young man's clothes, pants, and boots were all splattered with mud spots. The dark brown stains were particularly conspicuous on the pure white fabric. In addition, there were spots on his right chest and the outside of his upper arms. As well as the position of the trouser legs, the number 32 is printed in the characters of the Hive civilization. Although Kaylan cannot see his back from this angle, the picture unlocked by the memory fragments can generate a 360-degree picture with no blind spots in Ian's mind. On the back of this male young man, there is also a huge number 32 printed on it. His wrist holding the hunting knife trembled slightly, and there were still traces of undried blood on the blade. Judging from the color and viscosity of the blood, it seemed that it was not human blood. A hunter participating in the hunt, Kaylan thought to himself, but this look seems a bit embarrassing. In Ian's impression, the nobles who participated in hunting basically rode tall horses, wore expensive and elegant windbreakers or hunting attire, held bows and arrows or shotguns in their hands, and chased running prey in the forest. A large group of servants surrounded the front and rear. Speaking of which, people with insufficient authority levels shouldn't be able to enter the uptown district, right? So where do the servants that these powerful people usually need to call come from? Is it a robot or an armed person with level 4 authority? Or, servants are only considered items owned by the powerful, not people, so they are not included in the Hive City residents' hierarchical system? The young man in front of him did not feel like a high-ranking third-level resident to Kaylan. From him, Kaylan could not feel the temperament that a superior person should have at all. Kaylan even looked at this male young man. The emotion of fear was captured in his eyes. Could this be an unexpected situation during hunting? As for the number on his body, could this be a hunting competition? At this moment, as if he sensed something, the young man immediately left the tree trunk he was leaning on, lay down on the ground, and swept the fallen leaves next to him, creating a simple but an extremely effective disguise. Although it is an artificial forest, the environment in the forest is extremely complex. The pitted ground is covered with a large amount of fallen leaves and humus. This young male happened to be lying in a low-lying shallow pit, and he was almost in the blink of an eye with the surrounding people. The environment is integrated into one, and at first glance, you can't tell that there is a big living person hiding in this place. This guy's camouflage skills are very good, he should be a veteran who is proficient in hunting. Kaylan commented in his heart. But when a beast that looked like a feline appeared on the screen, Kaylan knew that this guy's disguise was useless. This beast was tracked by sniffing the remaining scent on the ground. Even if the male young man buried himself in the soil and remained motionless, even his heartbeat and breathing were temporarily blocked, he could not escape the beast's pursuit. This is a giant cat with brown hair all over its body. Its appearance is very similar to the saber-toothed tiger that has long been extinct on the earth. However, compared to the African giant saber-toothed tiger, which is 1 meter high at the shoulders and 3 to 4 meters long, the giant saber-toothed tiger in front of you is smaller. The shape of the beast is even more exaggerated, with a shoulder height of more than 2 meters and a body length of nearly 10 meters. The iconic pair of fangs are like two long swords, which can easily penetrate a human's chest, even just like skewering candied haws on a stick. There is no pressure to put 2 or 3 people on it. Kaylan didn't know the power of the giant beast for the time being, but with its weight of several tons, he could imagine its lethality when it pounced. If the weapon in the hands of the male young man was only a hunting knife, no matter what, there was no way he could be a match for this giant beast. This young male seemed to have realized that his disguise was ineffective against the giant beast. Before the giant beast could approach, he suddenly jumped up and jumped onto a tree branch that was 5 meters above the ground. This scene immediately made Kaylan feel a little outrageous. Unless the gravity of this forest is set to only a fraction of the normal environment, referring to the gravity coefficient of Alpha Star and the Earth, otherwise, this person must be an enhanced person above level 7. There are no traces of modification on his body. Apart from the muscle lines protruding through the fabric of his pants, no outline of any mechanical device can be seen on his legs. In other words, this man is completely relying on with his own physical strength. He jumped onto a 5-meter high tree branch. Are the residents of the Hive City so physically strong? In contrast, the physical abilities of those tunnel dwellers in Passage 4 have deteriorated. Kaylan frowned, or, because this young man belongs to the third-level powerful class, he can enjoy benefits that ordinary people do not have, for example, enhanced surgery. The moment the man jumped up, the giant beast also pounced on him. However, the height of the giant beast's pounce was not high, and its speed was not as fast as that of the young man. It could barely pass through the leaping young man and pounce. An empty one. But the failure of the attack did not mean that the giant beast had no way to deal with the young man. The next second, the giant beast suddenly rose up with force, and the tree branch that was originally above its head suddenly reached its chest. It opened its big mouth and bit at the young man squatting on the tree branch. There was only a loud click sound, and the tree branch that was as thick as an adult's thigh was bitten off in an instant, and the young man at this critical moment, the man jumped up from the tree branch again and jumped above the head of the giant beast. A fierce look flashed in the young man's eyes. He held the hunting knife tightly with both hands and stabbed straight down. Under the dual effects of the strength of the arm and the inertia of the fall, the blade of the hunting knife sank into the back of the beast's neck without any hindrance, and then quickly cut downwards along the side of the spine. Thick and hot plasma shot out crazily. Although it was just memory fragments, Kaylan seemed to smell the strong smell of blood. The young man's original white clothes were dyed in just 1 second. Dark red. He rolled on the back of the giant beast and fell back to the ground. The giant beast, whose spinal central nervous system was severely damaged, was unable to fight back and fell straight to the ground. It was not completely dead, but its body had lost control, and it could only lie on the ground, twitching and struggling in vain. The young man gasped for breath, his chest heaving violently. He did not kill the giant beast immediately, but looked around vigilantly, as if he was worried that there were other beasts lurking nearby waiting to reap the benefits. Very precise timing control, the position and angle of the blade's insertion are also impeccable. A layman can watch the fun, an expert can watch the door. Although Kaylan has not participated in this type of hunting activity, with his high skills, with his level-enhanced human abilities and rich combat experience, he could definitely tell that this young man had considerable fighting skills, and he was very familiar with the body structure of this giant beast. "This is strange," Kaylan muttered in a voice that only he could hear. If he is familiar with this giant beast, he should know that the giant beast mainly relies on its sense of smell to search for targets. Then he had previously. Why do you still need to find a hole to hide? Isn't this disguise useless? Could it be to avoid other beasts? Just when Kaylan was confused, the forest floor in the memory fragment suddenly trembled slightly. It seemed that there was a behemoth that was much larger than the mutant saber-toothed tiger running at high speed in the forest. At the same time, the fear and nervousness in the young man's eyes reappeared, and they were much stronger than before. Resisting the curiosity to continue watching, Kaylan seemed to have thought of some details that he had not noticed just now, paused the picture being played, and pulled the progress bar back a little. Different from the sense of instant vision, memory fragments are like videos stored in Kaylan's brain. As long as he wants, he can completely pause, play back, replay and other operations. The scene regressed to the time when the young man buried himself with fallen leaves. His entire body was pressed against the bottom of the pit, and only a pair of eyes were exposed in the gaps between the fallen leaves. Kaylan noticed that after discovering the pursuer, when it was the giant saber-toothed tiger instead of something else, the nervous look in the young man's eyes obviously faded a lot. Fast forward 5 seconds. The scene returned to the moment when the giant saber-toothed tiger bit off a tree branch and the young man jumped up ready to attack. At this time, the young man only had determination in his eyes, and the nervous and fearful look before could not be seen at all. But when the scene started to tremble, the tension and fear came back. Could this vibration be some kind of giant beast more terrifying than the giant saber-toothed tiger? Kaylan thought to himself. This young man can easily hunt the giant saber-toothed tiger, but in front of this giant beast, there is no resistance at all. Strength, so what he was avoiding before, was actually not the giant saber-toothed tiger, but this giant beast. Perhaps this giant beast relies on its eyesight to search for prey, so his previous behavior of hiding in a pit and burying himself in fallen leaves is fully explained. Continue. Perhaps it was because the half-dead giant saber-toothed tiger on the ground was too conspicuous. This time, the young man did not disguise himself again, but quickly chose a direction and ran away. But before he could run a few steps, an arrow shot out from the forest, accurately piercing his calf and pinning him to the ground. The arrows arrived first, and then the crackle of the bowstring came from the forest. The slight vibration moved from far to near. It wasn't until he saw the source of the vibration with his own eyes that Kaylan understood why a young man who could hunt a giant saber-toothed tiger by himself was so frightened. They were three young people about the same age as him, but they were not wearing white clothes and pants with numbers printed on them, but a set of high-end hunting clothes that could be seen at a glance to be of high value. They hold hunting crossbows with complex mechanical structures, the quivers on their waists are filled with arrows, they wear top hats with beautiful feathers on their heads, and behind them they carry retro shotguns with golden hollow decorative patterns on their backs, and compared with the young man in white clothes and trousers just now, holding a hunting knife, the attire of these three people is in line with Ian's consistent image of children of powerful people participating in hunting activities. But what caught Ian's attention the most was the mount under the three of them. It was a horse over 3 meters tall, to be precise, it was a mechanical vehicle made into the shape of a horse, with streamlined muscle lines. The torso is entirely made of alloy. On the inside of the leg bends, you can also see the nested structure of the hydraulic rod and the composite bearing used to reduce friction. According to Ian's estimation, such a mechanical horse may weigh 3 times as much as the giant saber-toothed tiger. If it gallops at full speed in the forest, it is not surprising that the ground will vibrate to this extent. The emblem of the Thorns gear shield is printed on the hip of each mechanical horse. The identities of these three young men riding the mechanical horses are naturally obvious, the big family that rules the western half of the upper city of the Hive City's children. The harvest is good. The youngest of the three controlled the mechanical horse and walked to the young man who was shot down. This guy is number 32, the guy who ranked first in points in the bottom nest qualifiers. Coupled with the points gained by this gamma-level mutant, our position in the top 3 of this group should be stable now. What's the use of the top 3? I just want the first place, the young man at the head said dully. As he spoke, he loaded an arrow into the hunting crossbow. Kaylan noticed that most of the mechanical parts of the hunting crossbow, as well as the arrows, are made of nano alloy. As for the bowstring, it is made of a polymer material with excellent ductility. With the technical level of the Hive City, even weapons such as gravity guns can be made. Hunting crossbows with sophisticated but primitive mechanisms like this may have been created simply to satisfy the interests of the powerful. Even so, Kaylan would not underestimate this seemingly simple hunting crossbow. The arrow just now, before hitting No. 32, first pierced 2 tree trunks several meters in diameter, and then used the supersonic speed hit the target. Let's not talk about how he aimed at the target with his vision blocked. The penetrating power of the arrow alone has completely defeated most of the individual firearms on the Ark. It's a pity that these selected people from the bottom of the nest have been hunted for a long time. It's just that No. 32's disguise skills are good enough, so he can hide until now. If it weren't for the regulations that can't be used to participate in the competition, if anyone else takes action, I want to shoot those guys through the head. Only then did Kaylan realize that number 32 in white clothes and trousers was not the hunter in this hunting activity, but the same prey as the saber-toothed tiger. P.S. Thanks to Xiao Jingjing for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 910. Don't worry about so much. Let's put the points we have already received into account first. The youngest horseman said, raised the hunting crossbow in his hand, and shot an arrow through the head of the giant saber-toothed tiger. That's right, the leader drove the machine forward and was about to kill number 32 with the hunting crossbow, but while the three of them were talking, Number 32 secretly pulled out the crossbow. He hit the crossbow that pinned him to the ground. In the next moment, he had jumped up from the ground. With one hand, he grabbed the equipment on the chest of the mechanical horse. With the other hand, he held the hunting knife tightly. He turned over and jumped onto the horse's back. He put the blade on the horseman's neck. Damn it, the other two horsemen immediately raised their hunting crossbows, but at this time number 32 actually shrank his body very cunningly behind the horseman he had kidnapped. Only one arm holding the knife was exposed to the shooting range of the two men. Of course the other two people could shoot this arm with crossbows, but with the strength of the hunting crossbows in their hands, it would not only penetrate the arm of No 32, but also penetrate the chest of their companion and number 32 body. It's easy to kill No 32, but the kidnapped person can't escape death either. Don't move. Number 32 shouted sternly, "Take your hands off the joystick." While yelling angrily, he overlapped his body with the body of the hijacker as much as possible. In this way, even if the other party suddenly chose to turn the mechanical horse's body and expose his back to the other two people would not dare to shoot at number 32. The sharp blade of the hunting knife had already been partially embedded in the skin of the kidnapped neck. A thin stream of blood flowed along the neck and into the collar. He raised his head and nervously glanced at the three people behind him from the corner of his eye. Number 12, he didn't dare to speak at all, and he didn't even dare to take a big breath, for fear that the peristalsis of the trachea would cause the sharp blade on his neck to move further. A stinging, numbing and itching feeling came from the wound on the neck. This feeling was not caused by the cut of the skin, but from the blood of the gamma-level mutant. The blood of this creature has a high concentrated neurotoxins, so when fighting with other beasts, even if you are bitten, you can defeat the enemy through the toxins in the blood, and its blood will also be smeared on the blades and arrow tips by the hunters, serves as a temporary poison-quenching weapon. He knew very well that if the blade was cut in half further and allowed the toxins on it to enter his blood vessels and flow throughout his body, even if there were several medical teams on standby outside the hunting ground, it would be difficult to save his life. He gritted his back teeth hard, as if he had made some kind of difficult decision, and then he gave the other two equestrians a suggestive look. The other two showed a bit of hesitation when receiving this look, but the youngest man still pressed an inconspicuous black button on the horse's back. The moment the button was pressed, two faint, soft white beams of light fell from the sky. One fell on the knife-holding wrist of No 32, and the other fell on No 32's wrist. Top of head. Like an ice cube hitting a red-hot iron, No 32's knife-holding wrist was directly melted by the white beam. The palm and the hunting knife fell to the ground. Immediately afterwards, only the lower half of the body is left with the head. The soft white beam of light disappeared as if it had never appeared. As for the abductee, he was not even stained with the blood of No 32. "I don't think we should call for help. We may have a way to deal with this damn No 32, another equestrian said angrily. "Let the supervisor intervene in the competition. Not only will we not be able to get the number that belongs to number 32, points, and an additional 10,000 points for rescue consumption, so our group's ranking will be at the bottom. Ahem, I hope you can say this without hesitation when it's your turn to have a knife on your neck, ahem." The person who was kidnapped glared at the person who spoke. With a glance, he lifted up the package hanging on the side of the horse's back, quickly found a bottle of gel-based ointment, and applied it to the wound on his neck. That knife is stained with the blood of a gamma-level mutant. If number 32 strikes harder and the toxin enters the blood, no one can save the second brother, the youngest horseman and the one who just pressed the button, said the man who pressed the help button. After all, it's not that you were careless and had to get closer. If you had shot the prey from a distance, this kind of thing would never have happened, the third horseman complained angrily. "Okay, now I think we can go to the sidelines to rest. This game is over for us. Even if we get all the unknown points in the hunting ground, there is nothing we can do about it." After saying that, he took off his hat and rubbed his shiny and smooth brown curly hair with some annoyance. But before he could rub it twice, his movements stopped. Vaguely, he seemed to realize that something was wrong. What exactly is wrong? He was startled and immediately realized, he knew his second brother's character very well. Among other things, his life-saving attribute was definitely full. Among their brothers, the second brother liked to choose conservative strategies the most. It is precisely for this reason that the points of their group can never catch up with other groups. Logically speaking, even if the second brother didn't refute what he just said, he would still choke on his words. But now, the second brother didn't say a word. What happened? He turned his head and looked at his second brother. He saw the latter holding the back of the mechanical horse with one hand and covering his throat with the other hand. His eyebrows were knitted together and his face was twisted, as if he was suffering from extreme stress. Big pain. Second brother, what happened to second brother? He was shocked and complained. If something happened to the second brother, it would definitely not be a scenario he wanted to see. Just when he was about to get closer and take a closer look, he was pulled back by the youngest horseman. Don't go over there. There's something wrong with the second brother's appearance. Of course I know something is not right with him now. It must be the blood poison of the gamma-level mutant, the man said urgently. Damn it, the toxin must have entered the blood, and first aid measures must be taken immediately. At least, the second brother cannot be allowed to. He died in front of both of us. No, this is not a sign of poisoning, the youngest horseman said solemnly. When the gamma-level mutant's blood poison attacks, the whole person will twitch violently, the limbs will be uncontrollable, and at the same time, shortness of breath and shock will occur. Do you still remember those people who were shot by our poisoned arrows? The second brother's current appearance does not look like he has been poisoned by blood at all. What else could be the reason? The second brother is covering his neck. It must be because of the wound on his neck. Damn it, could it be that in addition to blood poison, number 32 also smeared other things on the blade? Something, the man's tone became more and more urgent. No matter what the reason is, we must rescue the second brother immediately. Also, call the emergency medical team immediately. Only then did he remember the medical team on standby outside the field, but he pressed the call for help button 7 or 8 times in a row, but did not get any feedback. It's useless. I just tried it. The call button didn't work, the youngest rider said, suddenly controlling the mechanical horse and taking 2 steps back. Look at the second brother, his neck. What did you say? The man raised his head and looked in the direction the other person said. With just one glance, his expression had already solidified. Not only was his expression frozen, but Ian's expression, who was watching this video from God's perspective, was also frozen. Tiny tentacles like seedlings emerged from the fingers of the horseman they called second brother. Second brother seemed to want to press these tentacles back with his hands, but his efforts failed. These tentacles were completely useless. More and more tentacles emerged from the wounds on their necks, and soon they formed a squirming ball of flesh on their chests the size of a football. What the hell is this? The more excited horse rider exclaimed. He also controlled the mechanical horse to retreat, even his right hand unconsciously on the handle of a hunting crossbow. I don't know, although the youngest equestrian is the youngest of the 3 people in the group, he is also the calmest. My suggestion is that we must report this matter to the family immediately and let the supervisor stop the game. What happened here may have been beyond the control of the supervisor. I know. But the communication equipment seems to be out of order. My call for help button and emergency communication button are almost broken, and they are useless, the other horse rider frowned. At this time, the tentacles that grew out of second brother's neck had already wrapped second brother's entire head. Kaylan seemed to be able to vaguely hear a weird chewing sound coming from this huge tentacle mass. Out. The communication equipment is not malfunctioning. The youngest horseman's expression became increasingly grim. It's just, no one on the other end of the communication equipment responded to our call. How could this happen? There should be many people watching this game, right? Except for the elders of our family, other families should be paying attention to this hunting ground. How could no one notice that such a serious accident happened? I guess there may have been a mess outside, but we in the hunting ground haven't noticed it yet. The youngest horseman took a deep breath, picked up the hunting crossbow in his hand, and aimed at second brother. Wait. Lao Chi, what are you doing? Another horseman's eyes widened in surprise. Do you want to kill my second brother? Although this man subconsciously grabbed his hunting crossbow when the sudden change occurred, from beginning to end, he never really had murderous intentions towards his second brother. He always believed that the second brother was either poisoned by some kind of strange toxin, or possessed by some kind of fungus or other parasitic organism. Do you think that second brother is still alive? The young man whom he called Lao Chi said word by word. The sound of broken bones came from the tentacles, and more tentacles joined in, seeming to be enjoying a gluttonous feast. For some reason, Kaylan suddenly thought of a somewhat disgusting metaphor. Warning, if you are eating or have poor mental endurance, please skip this next paragraph. When Kaylan just graduated from a public free school, he lived briefly in a slum area. The residences in slum areas did not have private bathrooms. Many slum areas were even rebuilt from abandoned industrial areas. There are not even water and sewage pipes connected under those plots. People living there must go to special public toilets if they want to go to the toilet, and public toilets are called toilets, but they actually have another name, called cheap protein cultivation tank. People's feces will be collected and used. It is used to breed a genetically modified maggot that can grow up to the thickness of an adult man's thumb and more than 10 centimeters long. It is a very cheap and high-quality protein source. Kaylan was once lucky to see the staff changing the culture tank once. The feces accumulated at the bottom of the tank was densely covered with a layer of white fat maggots. They squirmed, squeezed each other, and devoured greedily. Holding those filth, due to the large number of maggots, Kaylan couldn't even see the feces pressed by them. That scene made Kaylan retch for 3 days, and he didn't touch food made of artificial protein for a week, even though the labels of those foods stated that the source of the protein was a chemical synthesis workshop. The tentacles that were eating the second brother's body in front of him naturally reminded Kaylan of those fat, snow-white, dung sea maggots. The camera turns back to the mirror image presented by the memory fragments. You. Another horse rider was choked. He kept saying you for a long time, but still couldn't utter a complete sentence. This thing is devouring the second brother's body. When it eats all the second brother, who do you think its next target will be? Lao Chi kept adjusting his breathing, and the hunting crossbow in his hand changed its aim back and forth. The reason why he didn't pull the trigger was not because he was concerned about his second brother's life or death, but simply because he couldn't determine where the weakness of the tentacles was. This thing, but. Another horseman said incoherently, how about, let this place be handed over to the supervisor? Let's leave this place first. Do you think the regulators have time to take care of our affairs now? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 911. Why don't the supervisors have time to take care of it? Not only this game, even the daily operations of the entire Hive City need to be coordinated by the supervisors. If she can't even do this kind of thing well, then I think she can be thrown away directly. Go into the incinerator and get a new one. The supervisor in his mouth obviously refers to the manager Nieto. From his tone, it is not difficult to find that although the manager's authority level is level 2, it is one level higher than senior residents like them who have level 3 authority. But they don't seem to respect the manager very much. It seems that the fact that the manager is a manufactured super biological computer is not a secret within the hive, at least among the senior residents. No, you didn't understand what I meant. I mean, now, I'm afraid not only this game, but the entire hive city is probably in chaos, Lao Qi said with a gloomy face. Old Seventh, what are you talking about? Another horseman was stunned for a moment. You can't think that the entire nest is in chaos just because the supervisors and hunting ground managers don't respond to our news. If such a big thing had happened, the entire hive would have been plunged into darkness by now, right? But you see, the simulated sun above our heads is still on, and the air supply system is constantly pumping fresh air into the hive. Not to mention the alarm broadcasts that are bound to go off in the event of an emergency. Actually, I started to feel something was wrong a few days ago. Have you been to the lower city? The crossbow in Lao Chi's hand never moved away from second brother, and he stared at the mess. Almost the whole body of second brother was wrapped in the tentacles, and he said slowly. Well, I've been there, but it was a few years ago. The guy from Aziz's family said he would take me to the downtown area to have fun. You know, that kind of fun. I mean recently, Lao Chi interrupted him. Recently? I haven't been there. Why do I often go to that kind of place? To be honest, I don't want to go there a second time after having fun there once. I even doubt that women in the lower city don't take a shower once a month. The man said with a look of disgust. I'm afraid it's not like I don't take a shower once a month. According to the living conditions in Xiakan district, being able to take a shower once a year is already pretty good, Kailan thought to himself. I just went to Xiakan district last week to check the recent decline in output of the food production line, and then I discovered a problem, Lao Chi said. What is the problem? The population of Xiakan district has decreased a lot. And this news was tightly blocked by the administrators. Even me and my entourage were asked to keep it secret. After I came back, I went to see my father, and he already knew about this, but he also asked me not to leak it out, and asked me to go to the downtown area as little as possible in the future. The population is decreasing? Could it be that they all went to the bottom nest? But aren't the living conditions in that kind of place worse than in Xiakan district? If there is really a shortage of people, can't we just pick a group from the bottom nest? Another, as he was talking, he suddenly paused. Well, could it be that the administrator sent all the people from lower city to the surface? The ground exploration team is composed of bottom nest residents. Even if they are treated as a one-time consumption, it is difficult to consume them all in such a short time. After all, the elevator's transportation capacity is limited and can be used by explorers. Equipment for operations on the surface has always been in short supply. Without equipment support, the people sent to the surface cannot survive even a day. Even if the lives of the people in the bottom nest are not valuable, there is no reason to waste them in vain. Lao Chi continued, what's more, the 2 times I went to Xiakan district were only half a month apart, and the population of Xiakan district was reduced by at least half. What did you say? The population of Xiakan district has been reduced by half, another person immediately exclaimed. I thought you said that the population reduction would be 10% or 20%, half of the population. How is this possible? Nothing is impossible, this is just my conservative estimate. It may actually be more. Is it possible that some kind of plague is spreading in Xiakan district? That's why my father asked you to try not to go to Xiakan district. The other person seemed to have a bit of luck and asked tentatively. I didn't receive any reports related to the plague. I even ignored the supervisor's warning and privately interviewed several residents of the lower city for questioning. Where is the result of the inquiry? Another person asked hurriedly. Not only did he want to know, but Kailan, who was staring at this scene, was also intrigued. They told me that those people, all disappeared inexplicably. It is precisely because of this incident that people in Xiakan district are now panicked. There is already a huge shortage of workers in the factory, and the remaining people are too worried to work. Several assembly lines are at a complete standstill. Lao Chi suddenly stopped mid-sentence. After a second, he squeezed out 4 words through his teeth, "It's finished." "What's finished? Who's finished?" The other person was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted and suddenly turned his head to look at second brother. Their second brother has disappeared, not even a trace of bones, or in other words, not even a trace of blood. The back of the mechanical horse was so empty that not even a hair could be found. The equipment originally worn by second brother was scattered on the ground, and his clothes were torn into countless pieces, as if they had been put through a meat grinder. The group of tentacles that had grown larger than a human rolled down to the ground. It first touched the corpse of number 32 on the side, and then moved closer to the corpse of the giant saber-toothed tiger. But the tentacle group did not attack the 2 corpses. Instead, they turned to the 2 people riding on the horse. Although this group of tentacles has no concept of a face at all, and it can't even be distinguished from the front or the back, both the 2 people riding the horse and Kaylan from the perspective of God all had the same feeling. This tentacle group was facing those 2 people, looking at them. This group of tentacles didn't seem to be interested in the corpse. After eating the second brother, it was obvious that the only 2 survivors present were the next targets. "Go to hell, monster." The man was still stopping Lao Chi from firing crossbows at second brother, but this time he struck first and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Buzz, the bowstring of the Jinu made a loud noise, and the crossbow bolt made of nino alloy instantly penetrated the center of the tentacle group. However, except for a brief moment of stiffness in the tentacles, nothing happened. The tentacle ball directly vomited the crossbow arrow out of the body. As for the wound, it healed as before in just 2 seconds. "Can't kill it." The man was suddenly shocked and hurriedly tried to load another crossbow arrow, but the faster he tried, the more his hands shook. He failed to successfully load the crossbow arrows into the arrow slot 3 times in a row. And finally even dropped the crossbow arrow to the ground because his finger was cut by the buckle on the side of the arrow trough. Seemingly for competitive purposes, this hunting crossbow, which can obviously be set to burst fire and auto-load, is forced to fire only 1 round and reload 1 round, and the reloading steps have become slightly cumbersome. According to K. Ian's estimation, if he was given a day to get familiar with this hunting crossbow, it would take about 2 seconds to complete a reload under extraordinary performance. This is a good exercise equipment, but it is definitely not an excellent weapon. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" He cursed 3 times in a row and reached out to touch the quiver hanging on his waist, probably because of excessive nervousness, or perhaps in response to the sentence "It rains all night when the house leaks," as the old saying goes. His elbow actually hit the release button of the quiver strap. With a pop, the hanging pouch was disconnected, the quiver opening drooped to one side, and the spare crossbow arrows inside fell to the ground with a clatter. The man's face suddenly turned pale. Just when he gave up the crossbow and wanted to take off the shotgun hanging on his back, the group of tentacles finally squirmed closer, jumped up suddenly, and rushed towards him. Just when the tentacle group opened the tentacles in an attempt to wrap his upper body, Lao Chi, who had been standing still, finally took action. He had just been observing the situation of the tentacle group, and after discovering that his companion's crossbow arrows had no effect, he was no longer in a hurry to shoot. It was only now that the tentacle group exposed the internal core hub used to connect the tentacles during the attack, and he chose the attack target. Kaylan, who was watching, admired in a low voice in his heart. Except for No 32, among the 3 people, the youngest Lao Chi was actually the most mature and calmest. His thinking and sense of smell are very keen, and his logical and associative abilities are also very strong. If the other 2 people are the standard dudes, then this 7th child can definitely be regarded as a noble elite in the true sense. If the other children of this family are like the other 2, then the position of the heir of this family will most likely fall to Lao Chi in the end. Kaylan put himself in his shoes and thought that if it were him, he would have made the same choice as Lao Chi in that situation. The crossbow arrows penetrated the core hub of the tentacle group cleanly and exploded suddenly. While the other person was in a hurry, Lao Chi had replaced the ordinary crossbow arrows on the hunting crossbow with explosive arrowheads. The strong shock wave generated by the explosion pushed out the tentacles that were in mid-air with no way to rely on, but at the same time, it also knocked the other person off the back of the mechanical horse. The man covered his face and rolled crazily on the ground, howling, Lao Chi, you bastard! My face! My eyes! I was blown blind by you! It hurts! He seemed completely unaware that Lao Chi had just saved his life, and was cursing his fellow brothers crazily. However, Lao Chi did not pay attention to his brother, but kept focusing on the group of tentacles. After the tentacles were blown away, they immediately bounced up from the ground, and 7 or 8 tentacles as thick as thighs were like an insect's jointed limbs. It moved quickly on the ground, closing the distance again. Just a few seconds ago, the tentacle was moving in a way similar to the wriggling body of a mollusk, but now it has learned to run. Whoosh! Another crossbow arrow was shot from the hunting crossbow in Lao Chi's hand. This crossbow arrow hit one of the legs of the tentacle group, and after the hit, it shot out a large number of dazzling arcs, the same as the explosive arrow. It is a special crossbow arrow. Lan estimates that its effect should be electric shock. When dealing with weaker targets, high voltage electricity can shock the target or even kill it directly. When dealing with stronger targets, it can also have the same effect. A limiting effect such as paralysis. The effect of the electric shock was still there. The tentacle hit by the crossbow twitched violently, but the speed of the tentacle mass did not slow down at all. It retracted the paralyzed tentacle and stretched out a new one. The tentacles replaced the original legs. The bodies of these tentacles seemed to have extremely high resistance, or there was an internal body structure similar to an insulating layer. The paralysis effect was only limited to the tentacle hit by the crossbow arrow, and did not spread to the entire tentacle group. At the same time, an even weirder scene appeared. On the top of the tentacle mass, a tentacle as thick as 2 hands clasped together stood up. At the end of the tentacle, the same twisted human face was reflected. The whole second brother who was just eaten by the tentacles. The face was very distorted, as if a layer of tight silicone was covered on a normal person's face. The facial features and facial muscles showed an indescribable sense of weirdness and horror. The next second, the tight pair of the closed eyes opened, and the dark eyes without white stared at Lao Chi and the guy who fell on the ground. It was too late for Lao Chi to reload the second crossbow. He glanced at his brothers on the ground who were still cursing at him out of the corner of his eye. He tightened the reins hard and controlled the mechanical horse to turn around and run away. Cold enough. Lan nodded and commented, but in this case, it is not practical to save the man on the ground. The final outcome may be that the two people are entangled in the tentacles together. Using the injured as a delay to buy yourself time should be considered the best solution at the moment. It's callous, but correct. The tentacle group did not pursue Lao Chi, but pounced directly on the fallen man, wrapping him up entirely. This time, it only took 1/3 of the time to devour the man. Before long, a second face appeared on the erected tentacle. 2 distorted faces were squeezed together, and 4 whiteless eyes looked in the direction where Lao Chi was escaping. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 912. The content contained in the memory fragments ends here. Lan doesn't know whether the old 7th man was caught up by the tentacle group in the end, but even if he escapes for a while, it will be difficult for him to explode in all aspects next. Survive the disaster. According to Nieto on the 2nd level, there are no real survivors in the entire hive except for biological computers like them. If we insist on making exceptions, the tunnel dwellers hiding in passage number 4 can barely be regarded as survivors, but becoming like that is actually not much different from being swallowed up by disaster. As a hunter, have you ever hunted? Lan suddenly turned his head and asked 33. Relic hunters are not the kind of hunters from the old era. This joke is a bit cold, 33 muttered, but having said that, when I was a soldier, I did hunt, you know, special the troops will always receive some strange missions. When the logistics supplies cannot keep up, we can only fill our stomachs by ourselves. Unfortunately, as far as I know, most of the meat from the indigenous creatures on Alpha Planet is not edible. For eating, even if the few are barely edible after processing, the texture and taste are not very good. Then you may not know that there was once a popular hunting activity among the rich, Kaylan said, although he had never participated in this activity himself. Through Zofia and Yayan's descriptions, he knew I have some understanding of this. The large consortiums that organize hunting activities will capture some relatively docile indigenous creatures, remove their lethal attack organs through surgery, and then release them into a designated area for those who participate in the activity. Hunt. It sounds like a very luxurious entertainment. 33 curled his lips. You mean, the forest under our feet is also a similar place? That's right. Moreover, in addition to wild beasts, the prey also includes those people selected from the lower city area or the bottom nest. I suddenly felt that this nest city deserved to be destroyed by a disaster. 33 said. Arc, West District 1. The dome modules of the entire area have been completely opened, and all the warships that can be mobilized near the Ark are hovering over the West Area 1. Lin Kaiming glanced at the dense shadows of ships above his head and couldn't help but sigh. It is indeed possible for the powerful weapons on the battleship to directly kill the target, but it is difficult to control the power to the extent that it can just kill the target without damaging the structure of the Ark. Other areas are okay. The bottom of the West Area 1, in addition to the underground ice house, there is also one of the Ark's several main reactors. If the weapons on the battleship accidentally penetrate the protective layer and detonate the reactor, the damage caused may be more serious than Alexander's final judgment. What's more, the West First District is close to the core area of Ark. Any module of Ark can be discarded, but not the core area. Whether it is the core mastermind, the Blackwell, or the cabin where the members of the undead crew are located, these are the top priorities of the Ark. Without these, there is no need for the Ark to exist. Therefore, according to the above plan, it is better to send ground troops to intercept the target first. If the ground troops fail, the fleet will then launch an attack. And this group of hard-working ground troops naturally refers to Lin Kaiming and his group. Along the way, various checkpoints in West District 1 were destroyed beyond recognition, alloy roadblocks weighing several tons were twisted into twists, and heavy tanks and armored vehicles were directly transformed into decoration. Several quickly deployed movable barricades were completely razed, leaving only the torn bases on the ground. As for the corpses of the guarding troops, not a single one was seen. The semi-solidified pulpy flesh was deep enough to cover the instep of the road. In the past, describing the tragic battlefield as a meat grinder was an exaggerated metaphor, but now, this metaphor is not only not exaggerated, but has become extremely realistic. Even though Lin Kaiming and his group were all elite operators from the Crisis Management Department, everyone looked extremely pale when they saw such a hell-like scene. As the first troops to rush to the scene, no one in Lin Kaiming's team spoke. The strong smell of blood kept entering their noses, and even Lin Kaiming himself felt waves of turbulence in his stomach and throat. He felt that if he spoke, the mushy food residue still in his esophagus might be spit out directly. He and his men had not rested for 10 hours. When they were driving, they took advantage of this gap to stuff their mouths with energy bars, compressed biscuits, and other things, but now, they would rather wish that they were hungry. Following the vehicle of the crisis management section were half a company of remnants of the garrison. Although these soldiers were considered well trained, they had very little combat experience compared to the soldiers of the field corps. Some of them people have never even seen blood. When they saw the scene in West District 1, there were a lot of retching sounds. The driver of an armored truck even stuck his head out of the window to vomit, causing the front of the truck to tilt and hit him on top of the guardrail on the roadside. Fortunately, the car had begun to slow down at this time, otherwise the heavy armored truck would have rolled over and the entire road would have been blocked. How many people are there in the garrison in West District 1? Lin Kaiming took a few deep breaths of the smelly air, forcing himself to adapt to the smell, and then asked his subordinates. Before, some people were transferred to the Blackwell defense line. However, considering that there are research institutes and underground ice houses in the West 1st District, they did not transfer all the people. When the troops from all units are added together, there will be 0. We finally got it together, and there should be 3,000 to 4,000 people left. It seems that among the 3,000 or 4,000 people, there should be very few survivors. Lin Kaiming raised his feet, and the thick blood mixed with minced meat stuck to the soles of the combat boots, looking like it's like dark red brushed cheese, except that this thing is exactly the opposite of cheese. It will only make those who see it lose their appetite. The surveillance network in West District 1 has been completely paralyzed. We are now unable to determine the target's location, the subordinate said to Lin Kaiming. According to the judgment of the superiors, the target should have entered the underground ice house. We were late. Then it seems that we can only use another combat plan. Lin Kaiming sighed, and then looked up at the densely packed ship shadows in the sky. He knew very well that before his group was wiped out, the fleet above him would not launching an attack on the target. Well, the latest order just came from above. The interception operation has been changed to an annihilation operation. If necessary, the target can be destroyed together with the underground ice house, the subordinate said. What's in the underground ice house? The big guys in the crew know better than we do. Lin Kaiming shook his head with a grimace. The target doesn't even need to do it himself. He only needs to cut off the power of those freezing cabins, and those things that have woken up. It's enough to give us a headache. Lin Kaiming turned around and looked behind him again. Various vehicles were coming from all directions. The location they were in now was a peripheral military base in the West District 1. This base was originally used to defend the West District 1 and the Institute's troops stationed there, but now, all that's left is a ruin covered in blood. This was set up as a gathering place for all units involved in the operation, according to regulations, except for people from the Crisis Management Department and the Research Institute. People from other units are strictly prohibited from entering the underground ice house. But just a few seconds ago, this ban was abolished by the Undead Crew Association. Those soldiers wearing thick power armor who jumped out of the truck compartment will be the vanguard of this combat operation. Lin Kaiming noticed that the performance of these soldiers was much better than that of the different garrison troops. After they got off the vehicle, they began to skillfully debug equipment, inspect armor and weapons, and the level of blood around them was far higher than that of the R-18 level. The plasma film scene turned a blind eye. Lin Kaiming shifted his attention to the emblems on the shoulders of the power armor worn by these soldiers. Only then did he realize that these soldiers were from the Field Corps, and they were also elites in the Field Corps. Since the Field Army suffered heavy losses in the Battle of the Ancient Copper City Ruins, the defense line has shrunk. Many troops have been transferred back to ARC to participate in reconstruction and stability maintenance. I think these people should be among the troops transferred back to ARC, right? Lin Kaiming watched these soldiers wrapped in steel walking towards the direction of the Research Institute, then waved to his subordinates and shouted, "Follow them, we are more familiar with the Research Institute and the underground ice house than they are, we still have to carry out the task of taking the lead." "Boss, are you afraid of death?" the operator who had been following Lin Kaiming asked while loading various special ammunition into the magazine. "No one is not afraid of death, there is nothing to be ashamed of." Lin Kaiming could see what his subordinate was thinking at a glance. A truly brave person, even if he is scared to death, will still choose to come forward. It depends on your actions, not your heart. "Actually, I'm actually fine," the subordinate whispered, but his slightly trembling fingers while reloading exposed his true thoughts. "I was just thinking, or in other words, the following troops, can they really solve the target?" After seeing the true strength of the target, Both Lin Keiming and Lin Keiming's subordinates knew very well that they alone would never be able to solve the target. The only thing they could do was to use their own lives to drag down the target. Stay on target and buy a few minutes, or even seconds for the troops coming from behind. I don't know, Lin Keiming said. This was his true thought. Maybe even the crew members don't know whether the combat operation will be successful in the end. Even a battleship can't kill that person. The subordinate pressed the last newly defrosted active ammunition into the magazine, and then stuffed the magazine into the equipment on the waist. Maybe we can kill, maybe we can't, it's already reached this point. All we can do is do our best and obey fate. Lin Keiming patted his subordinates on the shoulder. Let's tell our brothers that after entering the underground ice house, there are two main tasks. The first task is to find and try to annihilate the target of this combat operation. The second task is to deal with the out-of-control collections, although the above requires us to accept the target. Don't worry about anything else, but I ask you to put the priority of the secondary task as high as possible as the goal. As the Deputy Section Chief of the Crisis Management Section, Lin Keiming is very aware of the consequences if the collections in the underground ice house get out of control, not to mention the troops entering the ice house. I am afraid that even the temporary assembly where they are now, every point will be broken by things coming out of the ground. Let the fleet in the sky know that if something comes out of the underground ice house, as long as it doesn't look human, just open fire. The main gun can't be used, but those close defense weapons can always be used. Right, Lin Keiming. He took out his communication device and spoke into the microphone. The fleet has received the request, and they want me to remind you. On the other end of the communicator, the liaison officer responsible for coordinating various units paused, and then continued, if there are ground troops and those if things are mixed together, they will also choose to open fire unless they are sure that ground troops can suppress those things. How long is the judgment window? Lin Keiming asked bluntly. 30 seconds. Okay, I understand, thank you. After Lin Keiming finished speaking, he put away the communication equipment. The meaning of the determination window is that if there is a melee between a bunch of monsters running out of the underground ice house and ground troops, and if the ground troops cannot gain a decisive advantage within 30 seconds, even if the battle situation is just a stalemate, there will be no distinction between enemy and friendly attacks. It will fall from the sky and destroy the enemy and friendly forces together. This sounds unreasonable, but the current situation is urgent. The fleet can buy 30 seconds for the ground forces, which is almost the limit. Every second, countless variables may occur. If we want to follow the latest, if the insurance method is adopted, there will not even be a 1-second judgment window. Let's go. As soon as Lin Keiming finished speaking, several black spots fell from the belly of the battleship in the sky, quickly enlarged in his field of vision, and then landed with a crash. They were 8 mass-produced fallen angels painted in pure black. After landing, these mechas quickly gathered together and ran in front of Lin Keiming. This mass-produced fallen angel team is under your command. I hope you can make them play their due role. Deputy Section Chief Lin Demeter's voice rang in Lin Keiming's earphones without warning. P.S. Thanks to book friend 20210804103528600 for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 913. Fallen Angel Mass-Produced Model. A trace of hesitation flashed across Lin Keiming's face, but aren't living CPUs implanted with that kind of chip in their brains. The target has the ability to directly destroy the chip. These mechas may not, it cannot become a reliable combat force. They are different, Demeter explained immediately. This team has just been established. All pilots are selected from the fleet's elite pilots and retain complete self-awareness and clear sanity. A clear mind. Lin Keiming couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. Although he has never driven the mass-produced fallen angel, he knows very well how much pain it takes to drive this kind of machine. even the living CPU needs to be maintained at all times. Only in a semi-conscious state can the brain withstand the impact of the terrifying data flow from the body. If it were a person in an awake state, the brain would be completely scrapped if it were not operated once. That's right, so their use time is shorter than the original living CPU. Under high-intensity combat, it can only last for 30 minutes. Demeter paused for a moment before continuing, it's voluntary, don't waste it. Understood. Lin Kaiming nodded vigorously. With a crisp beep, a bright red countdown appeared on the dial of his watch. He glanced at it and saw that the remaining time was 29 minutes and 59 seconds. This is the activity time limit of this mass-produced Fallen Angel team, and it is also the action time limit left for ground troops. Although Demeter did not say it clearly, Lin Kaiming also knew that when the countdown reaches 0, hovering in the air, the fleet on standby will launch a saturation bombing of the underground ice storage. In addition, I have one more thing to tell you, Demeter added. We can now basically confirm that Zeus's main goal of going to the underground ice bank is to obtain sample No 344171. Sample No 344171, Lin Kaiming was stunned for a moment. There are more than 300,000 items in the underground ice house. Unless he has some impressions of those special or typical collections, he wants to collect them. Remembering every item in the collection clearly is something that the human brain alone cannot do. Among the more than 300,000 items in the collection, more than 70% are precious but of little value items. For example, an alloy block found in S-class ruins is extremely difficult to obtain, but the value is basically zero. Things like this account for more than 70% of the collection list. Judging from the serial number, this number 344,171 sample should be a collection that was recently put into storage, but perhaps the collection itself was too insignificant. Lin Kaiming found that he had no impression of this thing at all. This collection is claimed to be a cell sample of an indigenous creature found in the northern wilderness. It is actually the remaining remains of the special creature Seraph formed by the fusion of the meme body and the egg of Yinglong. The remains of the Seraph, even someone like Lin Kaiming, who is used to big scenes, couldn't help but lose his voice at this moment. Hasn't that thing been completely destroyed? No. There are still some parts that have been preserved, Demeter said. At that time, there were differences within the crew. Some people demanded that the wreckage be completely destroyed, while others, namely the radical group headed by Zeus, Pi, they asked that the wreckage be preserved for study. Crazy, they must be crazy. Lin Kaiming murmured. In his capacity, it was disrespectful to say such words to the members of the Undead Crew Association. Even though Zeus and the others had betrayed the Crew Association, when judging the remains of Seraph, Zeus was still a member of the crew. However, Demeter did not pay attention to such trivial matters and continued, in the final vote, the number of votes supporting destruction will be higher. Then why do you still keep this thing? Lin Kaiming was stunned for a moment and asked. Because after various attempts, we have no choice but to find that the current human technology cannot completely destroy the remains of the Seraph. Instead of throwing it into space and causing a series of uncontrollable situations in the future, it is better to keep it sealed at the bottom of the underground icehouse and subject it to strict surveillance and control, Demeter said. Looking back now, I guess Zeus had already decided to use this trump card at that time. Your Excellency Queen, if the target really gains that kind of power, I request that the fleet immediately attack the underground ice warehouse, otherwise, the mimetic infection event will break out again and the entire ark will fall. Lin Kaiming gritted his teeth and said. Although having the fleet launch an attack would almost certainly detonate the main reactor under the West Area 1, that would still be better than spreading the Seraph meme throughout the entire ark. At the beginning, solving the meme crisis incident basically relied on K-Ian's ability, but now, K-Ian's people don't know where they are, and it is impossible for them alone to stop the spread of the meme. The remains of Seraph are soaked in 700 tons of liquid nitrogen. It will take at least an hour to completely thaw. You have one last chance to try. Demeter said. Middle Sea, Forbidden Sea area, inside the underground pyramid. Jaeger discovered a very strange thing. The space inside the pyramid was obviously limited, and he could see the boundary with his naked eyes, but when he actually measured the space inside the pyramid with his feet, the space seemed to start again. Extended infinitely. According to Yagonactor's scan data of the undersea city, the outer outline of this undersea pyramid is a square pyramid with a base length of 4 kilometers and a height of only 1.5 kilometers. The cross-section of the pyramid it is a combination of two standard triangles with 3 strands, 4 strings and 5 hooks. In other words, as the hypotenuse of this triangle, the farthest distance between the bottom of the inner wall of the pyramid and the apex will not exceed 2.5 kilometers. But since Jaeger followed Wilson up the wall, the two of them had been running on this hypotenuse for at least more than an hour, but they still had not reached any boundary or corner. Jaeger can be sure that with the speed of the two of them, the distance they moved in more than an hour is definitely more than 2.5 kilometers. Even if the moving path is not a straight line, at least he should be able to see several other inner faces of the pyramid and himself. The distance between them changes. But if the distant wall and ceiling were used as a reference, for more than an hour, the two of them were basically standing still. Jaeger suddenly had a very strange illusion. He felt that the ground under his feet seemed to be extending infinitely. He stepped forward 1 foot, and the ground extended 1 foot forward. He ran 10 meters in one breath. The ground extends forward 10 meters. This is different from the conveyor belt treadmill in the gym. Jaeger is splashing an orange-yellow signal paint along the way. The dotted track has extended into a long one, but it has never returned to Jaeger. At your feet. It was precisely because of this that Jaeger was sure that every step he took was a place he had never reached before. He wanted to ask what was going on with Wilson in front of him, but due to the presence of the light ball, Jaeger kept his mouth firmly shut. The weird feeling that Wilson gave him now was no less than the space inside this pyramid. He knew very well that this Wilson was definitely not as simple as a coder of the engineering department of the hunting god hunting group. He had that kind of terrifying self-recovery ability. The personalities of the two people before and after, and the familiarity with the pyramid. Jaeger couldn't help but take a deep breath. This guy couldn't be entering this underwater pyramid for the first time, right? However, hasn't anyone ever entered the underwater city before? When did he come here? Just when Jaeger was thinking wildly, Wilson suddenly stopped. He turned around, glanced at Jaeger, and made a waving gesture to him. Jaeger stepped forward with a trace of suspicion. He never expected that in the next second, Wilson's remaining arm actually took out a pistol from his pocket, raised the muzzle and aimed it at himself. Fortunately, Jaeger had just noticed a trace of hidden murderous intent in Wilson's eyes. He himself was also wary of Wilson. The moment Wilson pulled out his gun, Jaeger rolled on the spot and avoided it. The muzzle of the gun was close at hand. Bang! The gunshot rang above Jaeger's head, and the bullet grazed Jaeger's back. Even though the back of the anti-gravity driving suit had a hard protective skeleton similar to an exoskeleton, the bullet only left a trace on the skeleton. The scratches were neither deep nor shallow, but Jaeger still felt a burning pain in his back. The opponent was holding a large caliber hunting pistol. This kind of weapon is generally chosen by front-line combatants. For logistics positions such as engineering operators, the personal self-defense weapons are either small caliber pistols or folding submachine guns. Even if you give them a powerful weapon, they may not be able to control the astonishing recoil. But the recoil of this hunting pistol seemed to disappear in Wilson's hand. After firing the first shot, the muzzle did not rise at all. Wilson immediately lowered the muzzle and aimed at the gun, which was still rolling on the ground before he could reach it. Jaeger stood up and fired the second shot. The second shot still missed. I don't know whether it was because of Jaeger's good luck or because Wilson was not holding the gun with his dominant hand. After a quick adjustment, the second shot missed by at least 10 centimeters and hit the inner wall of the pyramid. Walls and floors. Jaeger did not stand up in a hurry, but rolled to Wilson's feet, hugged the other person's calf, took out the dagger hanging on his shoulder, and stabbed it directly into the ankle. Wilson was not wearing any protective equipment. He was wearing the same work boots from when he worked in the engineering department. The tip of the dagger penetrated the synthetic leather upper without any hindrance and penetrated. On Wilson's ankle, Jaeger could even clearly feel that the tip of the dagger penetrated the muscles and ligaments and hit the bones at the joint. Jaeger gritted his teeth and twisted the dagger nearly 180 degrees. If the ankle is injured to this degree, few people can still stand firm. Even augmented people have difficulty in maintaining balance when the ankle joint is damaged, but Wilson is like an iron tower nailed to the ground. No matter how Jaeger held his leg and shook it, he didn't move at all. Jaeger's heart skipped a beat, and he knew he had made a wrong bet. This close combat technique, similar to street gangster fighting, was very effective when sparring with Hans and the others, but he forgot that Wilson was a somewhat different person. For a person with an ordinary human body, this kind of trauma will have no impact on him at all. Jaeger wanted to pull out the dagger, but found a huge resistance from the front end of the dagger. Wilson's terrifying recovery ability appeared again, and the bloody ankle wound healed in just half a second, and even disappeared. The dagger that had no time to pull out was caught. Jaeger didn't look up, but he could already feel that just above his head, the black muzzle of the gun was facing his head. He seemed to have seen a series of slow motions. The trigger was pulled, the firing pin hit the bullet. At the bottom of the machine, the primer was triggered immediately. The compressed gas generated by the explosion opened the cartridge case, and the tungsten steel warhead came out. Vaguely, he seemed to hear Wilson talking to himself, "I need to pay some price too, but I have more important things to do, so I can only let you do it for me." Nest City, 3rd floor, upper city area. Bang. A gunshot came from the depths of the jungle, startling Ian's 33. "What's going on?" 33 summoned all the black flying blades around him, forming an airtight black shield. "Kaylan, did you hear it too?" "Yes, I heard it." "It was a gunshot." Kaylan nodded solemnly. "It came from deep in the jungle." "Can you tell what kind of gun sound that is?" 33 looked a little strange. "It's too vague to hear, but I feel a little familiar." Kaylan glanced at 33's strange expression. "It seems like you can recognize it." "I'm not sure, but I've heard too many gunshots like this." 33 exhaled forcefully. "It should be the 4th generation R-type large caliber produced by Magnum Industries. It's a hunting pistol, and it's a portable model with a shortened barrel. This was the sidearm I used to carry in the army, and I'm very familiar with its sound." "Are you sure?" Kaylan asked solemnly. "You have to know that this gun should not appear in this place, nor should it sound at this time." "I wasn't sure just now, but the more I think about it now, the more I think, it's the same model of gun." 33 nodded. "As for why there are pistols made by Magnum Industries in the hive, maybe it was the pistol of Rooney back then." "Did they bring it in?" "Even if the gun was brought in by Rooney and others, then, who is using it now?" Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 914. Could it be some kind of mechanism? 33 judged with the inertial thinking of a ruin hunter. This possibility cannot be ruled out. Kaylan thought of the mechanical bugs he encountered in the glacier ruins that could penetrate into human brains and manipulate corpses. If one of Rooney's group was carrying the large caliber hunting pistol mentioned by 13 and unfortunately died in the Hive City, then its body is indeed likely to be occupied by some kind of creation left by the Hive City civilization and become a walking corpse. As for why the corpses can be preserved for more than 10 years, this is also easy to explain. According to Nieto on the 2nd floor, when Rooney and the others entered the nest, everyone had been severely contaminated by the disaster. There is no longer an individual that can be called a human. Even if it dies, the corpse will be in a semi-eroded state. Let alone more than 10 years, it is possible to preserve it for hundreds or even thousands of years. Judging from the remaining technological facilities and creations in the upper city, the technological level of the Hive civilization is no less than that of the Alpha civilization. The so-called brilliant but backward mechanical civilization is actually a civilization that only exists in the lower Hive and lower city. Illusion. The Hive City civilization has long mastered the technology of crystal circuit structures and has widely used them in various facilities in the upper city. In addition to the aesthetic style of the buildings being relatively close to that of human civilization on Earth, in terms of technological level alone, it is also quite different from the Alpha civilization cities on the surface. This should be a deliberate move by the managers of the Hive City. By restricting the technology in the lower city and the bottom nest, they cut off the possibility of rebellion by the people at the bottom and minimize the threat of those unstable factors to the high-level rule. There is such a huge technological generation gap between the upper city area and lower city area, which means that even if everyone in the lower city area is not afraid of death and works together, it is absolutely impossible to control the upper city area and higher levels. Even if it wavers a little bit. Apart from anything else, the most powerful weapons that the lower city district can obtain are just those firearms equivalent to those during the Second Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Facing the armed rebels in the lower city district, the upper city district only needs to release a few drones can kill all the rebels. Those guns couldn't even penetrate the drones' thick armor. As for wanting to hack into drones through technical means, that is even more nonsense. Xiakan district and Daikyo don't even have the simplest computer, let alone anyone who can use such equipment. Even if K-Lan travels through time in the past, they were given a special device for the top hackers on Ark, and these people in the lower city and the bottom nest didn't know how to use it at all. The most effective way to completely solidify class is to control the people at the bottom in education and culture, so that they cannot have access to cutting-edge technologies that are enough to advance the times. As time goes by, these people will no longer be able to, no matter how it can be regarded as a human being, it can only be regarded as an animal with a similar appearance to a human being. And the Hive City's attitude towards the residents of the lower city and the bottom Hive is indeed like treating livestock. However, the leaders of the Hive capital never imagined that what would overthrow their rule would not be the people at the bottom of their captivity, but a force from the outside, the disaster in their mouths. But why are they shooting at this time? 33 did not relax his vigilance at all, almost maintaining the floating shield around him. Listen to the sound of gunfire. The shooting position is at least several kilometers away from us. Even if there are not these trees as a cover, this distance is also completely beyond the maximum range of a hunting pistol. The target of the shooting should not be us, K-Lan said. Before the gunfire rang out, I didn't feel any threat or sense of crisis. Although from a scientific point of view, the so-called sixth sense is very unreliable, but for people like K-Lan and Sanzan, the former has passed by fatal crises countless times, and the latter has passed through cruel battlefields. The surviving veterans believe in their sixth sense far more than ordinary people living in a safe environment. There is no other reason. People like them are more or less saved by their sixth sense pass. This cannot be regarded as superstition, but a survival instinct. Even now, I don't smell the smell of danger, 33 whispered. This is very strange. If I hear such a gunshot on the battlefield, even if it is out of range, my whole body will feel, my muscles would immediately tense up, but now, the sound of the gunshot seemed to be coming from a movie screen, and I couldn't feel the tension at all. 33 swallowed and continued, compared to the sound of gunfire, it was the dense jungle in front of me that made me a little afraid. In this case, let's ignore it for the time being, K-Lan nodded. Anyway, the location where the gunshot was fired is on our only way through the jungle. We will know what happened when the time comes. The most important thing right now, things still have to go through this jungle. You said before that this jungle was used by people in the upper city as a hunting ground, right? 33 lifted the floating shield that required a lot of mental energy, and most of the black flying blades returned to him. In the hidden bag, only about 20 black flying blades were left floating around to keep alert. Even the tunnel dwellers can survive until now. The prey raised in this hunting ground will definitely have offspring leave it behind. According to normal logic, this possibility is very small. Kaylan glanced at the pad strapped to his arm. On the screen was the map of the upper city he had just taken. The area of this jungle hunting ground is not large. It is quite large. It is difficult to form a sufficiently complete ecosystem, if there is no artificial feeding, breeding, and introduction of various organisms. It will soon become desolate, unless what? The wild beasts kept in this hunting ground no longer fight each other and have lost reproductive isolation. Only in this way can this fragile ecosystem last for 500,000 years. Kaylan finished. Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head. Speaking of which, I am a little too serious. You are right, even the tunnel dwellers can survive until now, so how can this hunting ground be completely dead? Besides, those beasts, I'm afraid they have all been contaminated by the disaster. It seems, what's waiting for us will be hard battles one after another. 33 is not an exaggeration, and the battle with the tunnel dweller is not difficult. This is not only because Kaylan can use OuterSpace ability to assist at that time, but also because of the tunnel dweller's own it's about strength. Ian's 33 can completely suppress the tunnel dwellers by relying on their own abilities. The only thing that can pose a threat to them is the gravity gun. But now Kaylan already knows that the physical fitness of the tunnel dwellers has actually deteriorated compared to the hive residents. Even if number 32 is just a special case, the average physical fitness of the hive residents should at least be the same. There are 6 to 7 levels of enhanced human beings. In Channel 4, Kaylan had witnessed armed men kicking an able-bodied worker away. Even if the source of their power was augmentation surgery, in a society where augmentation surgery is so common, the residents of Shangcheng district, the level of enhancement will only be higher than that of people in the lower city. There will only be a minority of people like those in the Ark who are unwilling to undergo physical enhancement because they are afraid of the risk of surgical failure and the surgical process. In this way, the beasts that are prey should also be relatively strengthened. If it is just an ordinary tiger instead of a genetically modified giant saber-toothed tiger, this kind of hunting will not be a challenge at all to the residents of the hive city. This is like the nobles on Earth riding horses and carrying guns into the hunting ground, only to find that the hunting ground is filled with only chickens, ducks, and geese with less than 5 combat abilities. Yeah, Kaylan sighed and checked the gravity gun in his hand again. Be prepared. After saying that, he punched a positioning beacon at his feet and walked forward. 33 followed. I didn't expect that. Not long after I left the grey mist forest, I ran into another forest. Looking at the towering trees around him, 33 couldn't help but sigh in a low voice. The speed of the two men was not fast, but definitely not slow either. They almost maintained a speed of about 2 meters per second. Compared with the grey fog outside, the terrain of this hunting ground is much flatter. This design is estimated to the obstacle crossing performance of the mechanical horses ridden by the dignitaries who participated in the hunt was also taken into consideration. It is necessary to make the hunting activity interesting and challenging, but not to set the difficulty too outrageously, and at the same time, it is necessary to make the participants feel a certain degree of comfort. Just when Kaylan was thinking about how he would control the game balance by adjusting the terrain if he were the designer of this hunting ground, the sense of crisis that he had not felt when he heard the gunfire suddenly emerged. Come up. 9 o'clock, it's not big in size, but it's very fast. Kaylan quickly identified the source of the sense of crisis. He originally wanted to use his time stop ability to see what the thing looked like, but he found that he was in Shangcheng district. The time-stopping ability, like OuterSpace ability, has also been banned. But it's normal to think about it. These two abilities have the same origin, so they will naturally be restricted together. I can only see a black shadow. Do you see clearly what it is? 33 crouched, holding a dagger in one hand and a pistol in the other hand, resting on the knife-wielding hand. Above the wrist. More than 50 black flying blades were released, sticking close to the ground and spreading silently around, waiting for opportunities to move. Can't see clearly, the time stop is also disabled. Kaylan did not directly use the gravity gun, although the gravity gun can level an entire forest, there is a short delay in triggering the effect. He had previously approached the tunnel dweller using the gravity gun through high-speed irregular movements and subdued him. And now, the speed of this black shadow can also avoid the attack of the gravity gun. Kaylan suddenly felt that he had relied too much on time stop before, so that after time stop was disabled, even his self-confidence was greatly reduced. I can't predict the movement trajectory of that thing, I can only see it scurrying between the trees. Kaylan said, I don't want to use a gravity gun. The movement created by this kind of thing is too big and will cause trouble to cause unnecessary trouble. I agree. 33 nodded briefly, don't use this thing if you can't use it. Kaylan hung the gravity gun on the equipment on his waist, then pulled out the engineer shovel inserted on the other side, and opened the folded shovel head. That thing is not running around, 33 said solemnly, the distance between it and us has been shortening, it is only 20 meters. This distance is my advantage range, let me test it first. Before he finished speaking, those black flying blades that were sneaking close to the ground suddenly shot into the air, forming a siege and killing force, trapping the black figure inside. The movement trajectory of the black shadow did not change, but directly collided with several of the flying blades. The expected sound of the sharp blades cutting flesh and blood did not appear, replaced by the clang of metal collision and splashing. Spark. The black shadow knocked away the black flying blades, tore a gap in the killing circle, and then dodged and hid behind a big tree. So hard, 33 raised his hand to retrieve the flying blades that collided with the black shadow. He was shocked to find that the flying blades forged with pure nano alloy had deformed to a certain extent. The carapace on that thing, it's very hard. As far as I know, the only material on Alpha that can compete with nano alloy is another piece of nano alloy. Kaylan said, the armor of this thing is probably also made of nano alloy. Is it an artificial creature? 33 was surprised. Nano alloy is a synthetic material, how could it grow on the body of a beast? It may be man-made, or it may be evolved. Kaylan shook his head and whispered, there are so many nano alloys in the upper city. There is no shortage of indigenous creatures on Alpha Planet that can digest metals. If the digestive systems of these creatures are strengthened, they should be able to use the swallowed nano alloy for their own use. I understand, then this thing is not easy to kill. If it's a living thing, there are weaknesses after all, such as eyes, mouth, nose, etc. As long as you can seize the opportunity, here you go. Just as the two were talking, the black shadow that had approached 10 meters away suddenly jumped out from behind the tree. This time, it no longer dodged left and right, but crashed straight towards Kaylan. Kaylan finally saw the shape of the black shadow clearly, it was a creature about 2 meters long that looked like a crocodile. But unlike the crocodiles on Earth, it actually had 8 pairs of crocodiles on both sides of its body. Paw. P.S. Thanks to non-existent people, book friends 201750502095238711, and book friends 202108041035286000 for the 100 starting coins.